Good morning, committee.
In a minute.
Good morning, Chair.
Good morning. Thank you.
Councillors and Mayor.
Thank you. It is 9 o'clock, so I'm going to get this meeting started. I'd like to call meeting to order at 9:01 a.m. and confirm that all members, with the exception of Councillor McIntyre, thank you, is not present at this point, but I'm sure will be joining shortly. I'd also like to confirm that our CAO, clerk, and members of the senior management team and staff are present, and advise that the public input on the agenda is always invited at the following address: TML public comment at muskokalakes.ca. And for today's agenda, there was no public comments. I'd also like to remind committee that today's meeting is being live streamed and recorded on the Township of Muskoka website and YouTube channel. By participating in the open public meeting today, you are consenting to your image, voice, and comments being recorded and posted online. I'd also like to note that there was no supplementary agenda, and at this point would like to ask committee members if there's any disclosures of pecuniary interest. Mayor Kelley.
Thank you, and through you, the presentation 4B from the library. One of the presenters, and in fact the chair of the board, is my spouse. I've gone through the presentation. I see no financial request, no financial discussion. It's an annual update of activity. So I am not going to declare now. If, however, the conversation through questions or otherwise swings in that direction, I'll immediately go dark, recuse, and refuse to participate and fill out the forms later. Thank you.
Thank you. Committee, any other disclosures? Thank you very much. It is Wednesday morning. I would like to note that I was going to recuse myself from item number 4C, which is to a topic on Scarcliffe Road, but that delegation has changed its timing till next month, so I will not have to recuse myself today. So, okay, so moving. Oh, I believe Mary Ellen, Councillor McIntyre is now joining us. Welcome. To note that today we do have two delegations. We will be starting today's meeting off. And the first is with MPAC, the second being the library. I did want to comment that we might note that there's two different time allocations. And as we're all learning the differences on when people are delegating or when there's been an invited delegate, the MPAC was you'll note that they will be allotted more time than the 5 minutes, but that's because we've invited them as from an education information standpoint to come and delegate to us today. So they are invited to present. Moving to the second presentation, which is the library, they will be following the more standard approach of having 5 minutes to delegate. So just as we go through this every month, I'll try to make sure I'm explaining if there's a difference from a delegation standpoint. Just a reminder that the motions have been pre-populated with random movers and seconders to expedite the meeting. And just a reminder to physically raise our hands until the chair has confirmed the vote. So at this point, I will move on to item number 4 and welcome Kaitlyn Potts from MPAC. I believe you are with us there. Good morning, Kaitlyn.
Good morning.
And welcome. And at this point, I will turn the meeting over to you to walk us through your presentation. And at the end, committee, just a reminder, it's a great opportunity to ask questions. Thank you.
Great, thanks so much. Okay, so good morning. Thank you again for having me today. My name is Kaitlyn Potts, and I'm an account manager within the Municipal and Stakeholder Relations Department at MPAC, the Municipal Property Assessment Corporation. I'd like to first take a minute to congratulate all council members on your elections. I look forward to working with you throughout 2023 and beyond. And whether you're newly elected or a seasoned elected official, please know that we are here to help. And we have an entire municipal and stakeholder relations team who can answer any questions that you may have. So to start with my presentation, municipal relationships are a priority to MPAC and to our municipal and stakeholder relations team. We want to continue elevating the municipal and property owner experience. Today's presentation will look at a high-level overview of MPAC and the property assessment system in Ontario. And it's intended as an introductory session. For those that are returning to Council, it will be a great refresher. And if there's any topics throughout the presentation that Council believes you would like further knowledge on, we can absolutely set something up by way of another delegation, or with me providing you the information through Mark. Next slide, please. Oh, we're there. That's perfect. Thank you. So at MPAC, we are Ontario's property assessment experts. Our job is to assess and classify more than 5.5 million properties across Ontario, worth a combined value of more than $3 trillion. In the past year, Ontario has grown by approximately 45,000 new residential homes. And in 2022, that added on more than $37 billion to Ontario's assessment rolls. Every municipality uses our assessments to make informed decisions about their community, including the distribution of property taxes. Ontario's property tax system and these assessments generate approximately $30 billion annually in tax revenue. Next slide, please. There's 4 key players in Ontario's property assessment and taxation system, and each have a different role and interest in this process. The provincial government, specifically the Ministry of Finance, is responsible for setting assessment and taxation legislation, as well as policies. They also determine the education property tax rate. Now, there's also an independent body that adjudicates appeals of MPAC's assessed values, and that's known as the Assessment Review Board. And this also falls under the jurisdiction of the province. Now at MPAC, we're an independent, not-for-profit corporation funded by all of Ontario municipalities. Our role is to accurately assess and classify all properties in Ontario, and we do this in compliance with the Assessment Act and regulations set out by the Government of Ontario. We are accountable to the province, municipalities, and property taxpayers of Ontario through a board of directors that is comprised of provincial, municipal, and taxpayer representatives appointed by the Minister of Finance. Municipalities such as yourselves determine budget requirements. Municipalities will set tax rates, collect property taxes to pay for municipal services, such as police, fire, roads, recreation, water, among many others. Municipalities will use MPAC's assessments and the established tax rates to distribute their tax requirements to ratepayers. And finally, the property owners. Property owners pay the property tax bill, and they help set market value through ongoing property purchases and sales. Next slide, please. As you can imagine, maintaining Ontario's property database is very important. Property data is continuously updated so that municipal records are accurate when our municipal stakeholders are making important tax decisions. Maintaining Ontario's property database includes inspecting and assessing new construction, additions, and renovations, responding to property owner inquiries, and working with them to help them understand their assessment. We also support municipalities through ongoing support and regular meetings. And we offer a platform called Municipal Connect, where our municipal stakeholders can obtain assessment-related information within their municipality. And we work collaboratively on projects that are important to municipalities, such as digital building permitting. We have important statutory duties, such as handling requests for reconsiderations when someone disagrees with their assessment, and maintaining people data by tracking school support for over 5.5 million properties in Ontario. Next slide, please. Monitoring the market and assessing newly built and renovated properties are things we do every day to keep our property data current. But we also periodically update every single property assessment in Ontario based on the same legislated valuation date. And we call this an assessment update or a reassessment. The valuation date for the most recent assessment update, which took effect in 2017, was January 1st, 2016. Now, this is when we determined what every single property in Ontario could have reasonably sold for in its current state and condition at a particular point in time. Regular revaluation of properties ensures that assessments stay up to date, and similar properties of similar value in the same municipality pay similar property taxes. Provincial legislation determines when MPAC conducts each province-wide assessment update, and they also set the valuation date for each update cycle. Next slide, please. province-wide reassessment that was scheduled to occur in 2020 was postponed by the province to provide stability and certainty to Ontarians and to enable municipalities to focus on responding to the challenges posed by the COVID-19 pandemic. As a result, property assessments continue to be based on a legislated valuation date of January 1st, 2016. MPAC continues to maintain and update the assessment role to reflect changes such as new construction and improvements to property. And when it comes to new buildings or structures, MPAC determines a value as of January 1st, 2016 to ensure equity when comparing to existing properties. Next slide, please. Ontario's property tax system is based on everyone paying their portion of what it costs to deliver community services. To do this, all properties are assigned a value at a common valuation date, as noted in the previous slide. Now, this is a principle called current value assessment, or CVA. It's the price a property might reasonably be expected to sell for if sold by a willing seller to a willing buyer after appropriate time and exposure on an open market. Next slide, please. So I just want to spend a moment here to reiterate that while MPAC awaits news from the provincial government about the next province-wide assessment update, January 1st, 2016 continues to be Ontario's legislated valuation date. And as noted earlier, this is a fixed date to which all properties are valued. Now, although the assessment update remains paused, our work at MPAC continues. We continue to keep property data up to date, and property owners will still receive an updated property assessment notice from MPAC if there have been any changes to their properties. In November, MPAC sent out almost 800,000 notices to reflect changes to properties. And once the province announces when the next assessment update will take place and what that valuation date will be, we will let you know and then can work to have some meaningful conversations as we work to finalize assessed values within your community. Next slide, please. So let's talk now briefly, one more back. Thank you. Let's talk now briefly about valuation and how properties are valued in Ontario. In Ontario, there are 3 industry-wide standardized approaches to valuing properties. We have the direct comparison approach, the income approach, and the cost approach. Now, your type of property will determine which type of approach is applied. The direct comparison approach looks at recent sales of comparable properties, and they're analyzed to provide an indication of value for properties assessed through this approach. This is commonly used with our residential properties. The income approach is the ability to earn revenue that is tied to the real estate and not the business that may be run from that location. So in other words, it's not the revenue that's being generated by, say, the Walmart, but rather it's the income by way of rent that the landlord can generate through the ability to lease that space to Walmart. And finally, we have the cost approach. Now, this approach is used when a property type is so unique and rarely sold on an open market. So we cannot rely on either the direct comparison or the income approach to determine its value, and that's due to lack of data. Next slide, please. So we talked about how we value a property, but what draws our attention to a property? It's typically one of the following things: a market sale, a request from a municipality or property owner to review their property, any building permit activity, or a request for reconsideration or an appeal. And those are all things that would trigger us to inspect a property. MPAC's role is then to take building permits and plans and turn those into assessment for a municipality. Our municipal stakeholders rely on MPAC assessments to levy property tax. The sooner MPAC can deliver assessment, the sooner our municipal stakeholders can realize new revenue. Every year, MPAC processes on average about 300,000 building permits, and those would be for new developments or any alteration or renovations to properties. We are the only organization with the data set of all building permits in Ontario, and our understanding of this data gives us a unique perspective on ways to modernize this collection and exchange to support our municipal partners. And just some insights based on some of the data we've captured over the past couple of years. In 2021, Ontario saw more than 48,000 new residential homes being constructed, and just under 50% of those were detached. We also noted that condos are getting smaller, but detached homes are getting bigger. Ontario condominiums are about 35% smaller on average than they were 25 years ago, while the average detached home is now 25% larger. Next slide, please. So resolving assessment concerns. So after we've assessed a property or changed an assessment, we mail the property owner a property assessment notice, and subsequently we will send a notice to a municipality to update their records. But sometimes property owners don't agree with our assessed value, and a property owner might connect with the municipality or council to let you know that they disagree with our assessment. But it is important to remember that property assessments are not taxation. And if you are to get an inquiry, you can help us by asking the property owner a few questions. The first being, could they have sold their property on January 1st, 2016 for that assessed value? The second, have they visited About My Property to review the information MPAC has on file regarding their property? Third, have they used About My Property to conduct a comparable research on assessed values in their area? And finally, if a property owner still disagrees with their assessment, they have the option to file a request for reconsideration, and we will review it free of charge. Now, there's also the ability to file an appeal with the Assessment Review Board if they still disagree with MPAC's assessment after doing the request for reconsideration. And the fastest way to start a review is by filing that request for reconsideration directly on About My Property, and property owners can find that on mpac.ca website. Next slide, please. So let's talk property taxes. We can spend a moment here to address the relationship between property taxes and assessment. Assessments distribute taxes. They don't determine the taxes paid. When a province-wide assessment update occurs, the most important factor is not how much the assessed value of a property has changed, but rather how the assessed value has changed relative to the average change in that class in that community. And this concept is explained in a recent MPAC toolkit that was shared with municipalities, and it's also available on mpac.ca. Next slide, please. So as I mentioned our toolkit, in anticipation for the next province-wide reassessment, we have implemented a strategy to address misconceptions about the relationship between assessed value and taxation, including resources for municipalities that will ensure when an announcement is made, we're ready with the support you need. This digital toolkit available on mpac.ca can help municipalities, including elected officials, mitigate misinformation and provide support and resources to educate and inform property owners. In the digital toolkit, you can find a new video that's called How Your Property Taxes Are Calculated based on the assessed value of your home. Next slide, please. So this is just a link to the video there, and I believe it's also available on your website. I highly suggest that if there's anything you take from this toolkit, you spend the 3 moments to watch this video. It is very informative. Next slide, please. So thank you for having me here today. A big part of MPAC's commitment to service is staying connected with our municipalities. So if not already, I would like to make sure you are subscribed to our In Touch newsletter, which is a monthly municipal e-newsletter, and that can be done on mpac.ca. And we also have a library of digital resources available. So be sure to reach out anytime if you have any questions or looking for resources that you can share with your constituents. Next slide, please. So finally, as I wrap up, I just wanted to share my contact information as your local account manager, as well as my regional manager's contact information. So again, if you have any questions at any time, please feel free to contact one of us and we'll do our best to answer any questions you may have. Thank you.
Well, thank you very much, Kaitlyn. That was, as always, a great presentation, and I have to commend you. That was exactly 15 minutes. So thank you. Committee, any questions? I'm seeing, Director Donaldson.
Thank you, Chair. I appreciate the opportunity to ask Kaitlyn a question. Thank you very much for coming today. You talked a little bit about my property and people's information on their own properties. There's a lot of information sought by members of the committee about other properties. Are there resources that people can look at or go to get information about other properties in the municipality?
Through you, Madam Chair. Thank
Yes.
you so much for that question, Mark. And yes, there's definitely resources available. As I mentioned in the slide, property owners can log into About My Property on our MPAC.ca website to review information MPAC has on file regarding their individual property, but they can also compare their assessment to comparable properties within their neighborhood, as well as file that request for reconsideration if an owner disagrees with their assessed value. But we also do have commercial products that are available on our propertyline.ca website. Now, this is available for anyone to purchase assessment, site, structural, and sales data on all properties across Ontario. And it's a site that's commonly used by our realtors.
Thank you. Committee, any Councillor Zavitz?
Thank you, and through you. Good presentation, of course. Question on everyone's mind and has been for a number of years. Specifically, as it relates to when the provincial government decides to update and drop the hammer on 16 and move to, I don't know, 2020 or even current to 2024. How does that look? I know you mentioned in your presentation that we were going to have at that time fulsome discussions. I can imagine they're going to be incredibly fulsome when a whole lot of folks are going to be experiencing quite an increase in land value and the perception of what that might mean. Can you speak to that in terms of how, or is that too far down the road?
Thank you. I think the question is, when are we going to see updated, or when do you anticipate we will see updated assessed values?
Thank you, through you, Madam Chair. So yeah, and this time we are waiting for the province to make the next announcement on when the province-wide reassessment will be. And at that time, we'll know when that valuation date will be. So once that announcement is made, we'll have a better understanding of what that particular point in time will look like for that valuation date, to be able to have those more meaningful discussions about what we're seeing in terms of any changes within your municipality.
Thank you. Councillor Roberts.
Thank you, Madam Chair. And through you, just a follow up to Councillor Zavitz's questions. I think the part of his question is, how will that be implemented? Whenever that happens, and will the property owner get hit with the full amount day one, or will that be transitioned over a few years? Thank you.
Thank you. Kaitlyn?
Yeah, thank you, through you. So in the past, when we've done reassessments, the assessment has been phased in over a 4-year period. So it's been gradually phased in. At this point, though, we are waiting on what the announcement will be from the province and what that cycle may look like. So once we have more information, we will be back to share that. Thank you.
Thank you. Mayor Kelley.
Thank you, and through you, excellent presentation. Just picking up and keying off on something that Councillor Zavitz mentioned, there's a perception, and I know you mentioned it in your presentation, Kaitlyn, that there's a linear relationship between an increase in property value and an increase in your taxes. And anything that we can do locally, anything that you can do, and I know you've got a campaign, I've seen it already, we got to double it and triple it, because people are going to get assessments, they're going to do the math, they're going to assume that a 50% increase means a 50% increase in taxes, and that's just not true. So we got to start with us, making sure we understand the relationship and be able to help you educate people as to how that really works. Because I mean, in a floating boat, basically, if everybody's taxes in a particular jurisdiction, or sorry, assessment goes up 10%, then frankly, there's no net change in anybody's tax hit. So I really think that needs to be understood, and we need to be able to communicate it, because I hear it all the time. Thank you.
Thank you. And I'm sorry if there is a bit of a conversation here, and I'm sorry if that was interrupting you, Mayor Kelley. I forgot to put myself on mute. Councillor Edwards.
Yes, thank you very much. Excellent presentation. On your slide on page 17, and that basically explains it. Even though your assessment goes up, it would probably be an adjustment of the mill rate. Now, I was looking at in that Gravenhurst and that budget, 2.6%. They're paying over $14 and some odd cents on a on their tax increase at 2.6. We were 7.5. We're only $7.71. So you just can't go by that, and it's the same with the others. So just I mentioned it. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Edwards. I'm not seeing any other questions. And Ms. Potts, we noted that I think you might have a colleague with you in the room, and that was part of our conversation. We realized that there wasn't an introduction up front, so we were hoping that you might be able to do that, please.
Thank you. I do. I have Christina Williams with us today, who is our account support coordinator, who works with me up in the district of Muskoka and Perry Sound.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you. Welcome. Committee, is there any other questions? Okay, seeing none, I'd like to thank both of you for joining us today. Great presentation. And I look forward to probably the next stage at some point to not only understand what our new assessments might look like, but also what that implementation plan is going to look like too. So we look forward to that ongoing relationship. So thanks very much and have a great day.
Thanks for having us. Bye.
Excellent. Okay, committee, we are going to be moving on now to our next delegate, which is, I believe, Val Duke and Cathy Duck on behalf of the Muskoka Lakes Public Library. So they're both here in the meeting. Welcome. Okay, so I think at this point, just for my clarity, Val, are you doing, Ms. Duke, are you doing the presentation? You're on mute.
Yes, thank you, Chair Mazan. I will be doing the presentation.
Excellent. Now I do have beside me our clerk who is going to be, our acting clerk who is actually monitoring timeline. So I will let you know if we're getting close to that 5-minute mark.
Okay, perfect.
She's got a
Thank you.
timer beside me. So thank you very much. And I'll turn the meeting over to you.
Okay, thank you very much, Chair Mazan and Mayor, Council, and staff. Thank you very much for having us. My name is Valerie Duke. I am board chair of the Muskoka Lakes Public Library. And everybody can hear me okay? Thumbs up, someone? Okay. We also have Cathy Duck here with us today, our CEO, and we're always very excited to be able to come in and share with you what's been happening at the library. So the opportunity to present is always something that we look forward to. And if you ever meet us in person, we're always talking about the library. And so we're always excited to tell you all of what's been going on and what, of course, we see going on in the future. So thank you. And I'll try to keep this brief. And I know you've got a full agenda, so we'll try to stick to those 5 minutes. Okay. All right. Next slide, please. Always starting at the first, I always want to share, because I know that there's new counselors on board, and I always like to start off with our team. And if anybody remembers 80s television, this is our A team. So this is the library staff. And I know that it was in the package for you guys to see, but we've got a whole host of variety of talents and experience and long-term staff members. They operate everything from our children's programs to our book clubs to day-to-day operations. And I really can't say enough about them. Their commitment, like I said in the slide, is evident in every aspect of everything they do. They really are the welcoming team. As soon as you walk into the library, that's that welcoming force that smiles and greetings that you see on the day-to-day basis. Next slide, please. And with that being said, this is our new board for the new term of 2022 to 2026. We do have a few new members since we've last presented. So Doug Crichton was a member that has come on board during the past term, and so may be new to you. We've of course got Mary Ellen McIntyre, our Township and Muskoka Lakes Councillor, and Deborah Stokes is another welcome addition to our board. So we're really looking forward to working with our past successes and building on that for the new term. Next slide, please. With that being said, we've worked in collaboration with staff along with the board to create our strategic plan. It is still ongoing until 2024, just to give the new board members time to come in before we've got to be looking to the future again. Our vision is always that we are committed to providing a diverse library collection and ensuring equitable access to all in a safe, positive, and welcoming environment, a community hub of engagement, knowledge, advancement, and enjoyment for the sustainable future. And that's essentially what we're always looking to share with the community. Some of our goals, we're happy to say that we've checked those boxes and we've been able to successfully complete some of our goals already. So we are looking forward to, this is a living document, so we're always adding new goals, etc. But one of the goals of obtaining provincial designation of the library accreditation status has been completed, along with the development of our succession plan. So we are methodically going through our goals and sticking to our mission, our values, and our vision. So we plan to keep going forward with the new term. Next slide, please. These are just some fun stats so that everybody gets a feel for what the library is doing for the community out there. Our active members, we've just got a little asterisk there to let everybody know what active membership means. And that's defined as a library user that has utilized their Muskoka Lakes Public Library card in the past 24 months. So it is that active membership that we're looking at here. And for a very small community with a small population base, that is very good numbers for us. Good news being with the new members, we're seeing an increase. Of course, everybody had some COVID times where membership and a lot of things were slowed down, but we're happy to say that the new members in the past year for 2022 had increased over 2019. So pre-pandemic numbers, we're starting to really see a growth again, which we're very happy and excited to see. The library materials checked out, again, is a strong number. It's not yet to pre-pandemic numbers yet, but we're slowly building on that, and we'll get into that a little bit further. The e-resources checked out is not physical items. That's the movies, downloadable books, etc. And we have seen an uptick and an increase in e-resources, of course, throughout the pandemic and now.
Val, just a quick note that we are closing in on 5 minutes. So I just wanted to give you that heads up. Thank you.
All right, so we'll flip to the next slide then, because this is all in your package. This again was just something to be able to see pre-pandemic, post-pandemic, that we are got an encouraging trend upwards, and we are able to see that we are coming back to pre-pandemic levels. Our users, we know, prefer the physical book versus the e-resources. So although we've seen an increase in e-resources, our physical books are back on the upward trend, which we're happy to see. Next slide, please. This is the fun stuff. Okay, so this is what the library is all about. We're just a community hub, and this community hub is welcomes all people to come in. So we've been rebuilding our in-house programs post-pandemic, and that's been our priority, and we continue to do so. So we've got a lot of child and youth programs centered to them. And next slide, please. Adult program, again, has been on the increase as well. So there's always something to find to do at the library. We've got on our website, we've got the calendar of events. So please check that out. And sorry, I can hear that going. Next slide. I can hear that. Okay, this is really important, so I'll be quick. So community outreach initiatives are our way of getting out into the community, whether it be through farmers markets. We offer in collaboration with the Presbyterian Church. We did Operation Winter Warmth, so offering a winter coat to those in need. We've got our mitten tree and our hat tree and all sorts of community events, walking story trails in each park, Hannah Park and in Jasper Park in Bala. Next slide, please. Library funding at a glance. Again, we just wanted to sort of showcase, not getting into numbers by any means, but just who is the backbone of how this library operates. So Township of Muskoka Lakes is our majority of our funding through the generous support of Township of Muskoka Lakes. We do always look for grants and abilities to increase our funding through grants, whether they be provincial or whatnot. Self-generated revenue is something that we're always looking to do, is to find ways to maintain our financial sustainability. And community support, I can't say enough about that, is that our local support is bar none better than we can ever imagine. There's always local support, whether it's through donations or community support groups as well. So we thank them again. Next slide. This just the final slide really is just talking about being back to a future. So we're really encouraged and excited to get back to a future of increased membership, participation, community programming, getting out there and doing community outreach initiatives and reestablishing our role as the community hub post-pandemic. So we've got a lot on the go. I've got the highlights there. I won't go through them because they're in your package. But of course, in 2023, we're looking to we're excited to work with the new board and get that infusion of new ideas and working on the strategic plan going forward, doing our succession plan. We are going to be running a community satisfaction survey just to make sure that we are addressing all the needs of the community and all the residents and visitors. And I'll just leave it there. And next slide. And just thank you very much for your time today. I'm sorry if I went a bit over. I did have my stopwatch going too, but once we start talking about library, it's hard to stop. So again, please follow us. We have a strong social media platform. And if you're not a member of the library, please drop in and grab that library card. And please take the time to look at us on social media because we're fun. Anyways, thank you very much, everybody. And I'll leave it there. Also, if you've got any questions.
Yep. Thank you very much, Ms. Duke. And at this point, just looking to committee, do you have any questions? Okay, I'm seeing none. Great presentation as always. It's such a great hub. I love that part of your vision. I believe it is. It is a hub. So thank you to you and the team for all the work that you've done leading us through the pandemic and now back to the future. I like that theme, getting back to business. So thank you very much. Thanks for coming today. And I don't see any other questions. So I think we will move now on to the next part of our agenda. Have a great day.
Thank you.
Okay, committee, I believe we are now on to item 5A. So I welcome our Director of Public Works to introduce that report.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and good morning, members of the committee. The first report is just an information report relative to the asset management plan. As you're aware, on the department's work plan for the year, we're going the next step on asset management. And hope to bring forward to you a corporate-wide asset management plan. The intention is to update our data sets, and that is currently underway. Once that's complete by the end of the first quarter, we will dive into the data analysis. I'm expecting that will take us probably most of the second quarter. And with that complete, then we can start writing the report. I hope to bring forward a draft report to this committee in August or September with a view to adoption by council before the end of the year. With that, Madam Chair, if there are any questions, I'd be happy to answer them.
Thank you very much, Director Becking. Committee, any questions? I'm seeing none. Okay, well, thank you very much for that report, Director Becking. We look forward to seeing those results at Q3. Thank you.
No problem.
Moving on now to item 5B.
Thank you, Madam Chair. The report before you is recommending that a bylaw be passed by council to accept the lands in question and to have them dedicated as part of the public road allowance. This report is frankly a housekeeping report. It's more than a little verbose for the purposes, but this being the first one that some of you have seen, I'm attempting to walk you through the process that we have to follow. The nature of the township being what it is, roads were not necessarily built in the road allowances that were laid out in the original survey for the townships, the respective geographic townships. And they trend on to private lands. I can assure you that the roads are, regardless of whose land they're on, they are owned by the township. And in fact, there's a principle in law called a trespass road. So the ownership of the road is not in question. That having been said, as a result of a severance application, it was brought to our attention that we were not the legal owners of the land on which the road was built. And we take opportunities such as this in order to clean up title and dot the I's and cross the T's, as it were, in a expedient way. And that is the recommendation that is before you. As a general statement of principle, we work with the applicants to cover the cost of reasonable expenses associated with transfers, so that these costs are not burdened on the property owner who is giving up the lands, and that will be the case in this particular instance. Obviously, we have no way of knowing when these things arise. So from a budgetary point of view, it's very difficult to budget for them. Sometimes we don't have any in a year, and sometimes we have many. So the budget is highly elastic, shall we say. In any event, Madam Chair, that gives you an overview of the process. If there are any questions, I'd be happy to try and answer them.
Yeah, thank you, Director Becking. Committee, any questions? Councillor Bosemarth.
Thank you. Director Becking, do we compensate the owner of the land, and how do we come up with that price?
Through you, Madam Chair, no, we do not compensate the owner. We are legally obliged to take ownership of the lands directly. That is covered off through the planning process. But because we do not compensate the owners of the land for the value of the land, that is why council has adopted a policy to assist the property owners with survey costs and legal costs and registration costs in lieu thereof.
Thank you. Committee, any other questions? Okay, seeing none, I will read the resolution. Moved by Councillor Kent, seconded by Councillor Bosemarth. Be it resolved that 3 readings be given to a bylaw to dedicate Part 2 of Plan 35R-26833 as a public highway. All those in favor? Great, thank you, that carries. Excellent. Director Becking, item 5C, please.
Thank you, Madam Chair. For the information of council, or committee rather, the committee received a delegation from a representative of the Royal Muskoka Island Association back in October, requesting a reduction in the posted speed limit to 20 kilometers an hour. Staff were directed to review the request and bring forward a recommendation, which is now before you. Under the Highway Traffic Act, the speed limit in a built-up area of which this is recommended to be 50 kilometers an hour. Council does have the authority to adopt lower speed limits if it chooses to. but there are some practical limitations upon that. In 2021, council adopted a bylaw to set speed limits on all of its roadways. And as a result of that bylaw, Saginaw Boulevard was assigned a speed limit of 40 kilometers an hour, which is consistent with the nature and use of the surrounding lands and the roadway itself. The recommendation of the Transportation Association of Canada is that speed limits be set at 50 kilometers an hour, but in areas where there is the significant potential for pedestrians, that councils can consider a lower speed limit, and the recommended limit is 40, which is consistent with the already adopted posted speed limit. From a practical point of view, speed limits below 40 are seldom enforceable, and frankly build up false expectations on the part of pedestrians in terms of the behavior of vehicles. For that reason, staff are not recommending any lower speed limit. The recommendation therefore before you is that the current speed limit of 40 kilometers an hour be maintained.
Okay, thank you. Committee, any questions? Councillor Bosenworth.
Thank you. Director Becking, do we have any roads in our township less than 40? That's question one. And second point isn't a question, but one of the residents from Royal Muskoka Island sent me a picture of a 20-kilometer sign on the road, which is probably not ours, but just for information, that sign is already there.
Thank you. Director Becking.
Thank you, Madam Chair. The answer to the first question is no. We do not have any roads that are posted for less than 40 kilometers an hour. The answer to the second question, I am aware that there is a 20 kilometer an hour sign on the roadway. It's, to the best of my knowledge, not a legal sign. I don't know where it came from. The one thing that I can point out is that under, when was it? Going back into the 1970s, when speed limits were in miles per hour, that sign may have been an old imperial sign. And if you do the conversion, it might make a little more sense. It's still not a legal sign, because in those days, the lowest allowable speed limit was 25 miles an hour under the Highway Traffic Act. So that makes me conclude that it's probably been erected by someone who didn't have the legal authority to do so.
Thank you. Councillor Nishikawa.
Thank you. Through you to Director Becking. Is there an opportunity, or I'm just trying to, I want to send a message to the folks that, is there an opportunity to put one of those signs up that tells you what your speed limit is doing? And I mean, mostly I'm thinking it would be a cost to those people in that location, but it does make a difference in some communities. I've seen an impact when people see that they're traveling so fast. I'm just wondering if that could be an option that we could put forward to folks. And do you have any idea of what the cost would be?
Okay, thank you. Director Becking?
An excellent question, Madam Chair. Certainly it's possible if that were the direction of committee and council, we could do so. I'm not up on the cost of those signs. I know that they are not inexpensive, and I would want to research and come back with an answer, but certainly it's an option. I've seen contradictory studies on the effectiveness of those signs. And so I have my own reservations on them from a professional point of view, but nonetheless, if that's the wish of committee and council, certainly staff can pursue that. Sometimes a more effective approach is to provide advance warning to motorists of the potential presence of pedestrians. There are warning signage in the Highway Traffic Act and the Ontario Traffic Manual that could be implemented. Staff are proposing to undertake a review of all of our warning signage throughout the township in 2024. Committee and council may wish to have us erect appropriate warning signage in advance of the situation, so as to make motorists more aware of the potential presence of pedestrians.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Nishikawa?
Sorry, just a follow-up. I was not looking at that we would necessarily, that the township would be erecting that digital sign, but just that we could advise people, because I know a number of other locations that people are wanting the speed limit reduced. But in reality, it doesn't make that much sense. But I would say that I would like to advise you that I think we should be erecting that signage as soon as possible, if that's the direction you're looking for.
Thank you. Director Becking?
Madam Chair, I would strongly advise council against allowing people to erect signs in our road allowances. If council directs that a sign be erected, it should be erected by the municipality and should be the responsibility of the municipality for long-term maintenance in order to protect the municipality's liability.
Thank you. And just before I go to you, Councillor Bosenworth, I think I just would like to have clarity, if I could, on the warning signage that you just mentioned that we plan to put it up in 2024. Is the question, or it was your question, we could, in this particular case, put some of that warning signage up earlier? Was that your comment?
Yes, Madam Chair. I do not need committee or council direction to do so. Okay. That is something that's under the purview of staff, and the offer that I'm making to committee is to move forward with that in advance of the 2024 review, if that's the wish of committee.
Thank you. Okay, Councillor Bosenworth.
Thank you. Director Becking, there's other roads on Royal Muskoka Island. I can't quite figure out where Sagamo Boulevard begins and Royal Muskoka Road starts and Cherokee Crescent. But that whole island they've got a very tight community there with lots of activities. They have a center property that's commonly owned with sports courts and baseballs and lots of things going on. So there's a lot of walking there. I think the idea of one or two or maybe three signs reminding people that there are a lot of pedestrians there. I think that's a terrific idea, and I agree with not taking the speed limit below 40. It's just not practical. So I would support that. Thanks.
Thank you. Okay,
Madam Chair,
yes.
If I could just interject, I think Councillor Bosenworth's suggestion is an excellent one. What I would propose to do with your blessing is we'll develop a signage strategy to apply to the entirety of that development, for lack of a better phrase, and implement it accordingly if that's what you so choose.
Okay, so just so I'm clear, we have a resolution in front of us that just talks to the 40 kilometers per hour. And are we looking to, or do we need to, Director Becking, add at this point any further direction for signage? Or is that something that I heard you say you can implement on your own?
I think, Madam Chair, deal with the resolution that is before you. And I think I have a good sense just by the thumbs up that I've seen that I know what committee wishes me to do, and I will proceed accordingly.
Okay. So I'm going to read this resolution, if I may, and then if there are any further comments after I've read this particular resolution, we can adjust it at that point. Moved by Councillor McIntyre, seconded by Councillor Nishikawa. Be it resolved that the speed limit on Saginaw Boulevard remain unchanged at 40 kilometers per hour as set forth in Traffic Bylaw 2021-087. At this point, what I'd like to do is open up for any other comments. Councillor Roberts and then Councillor Bosemore.
Thank you, Chair. Just comment. You may want to ensure that Councillor McIntyre is not frozen. Oh, there she is. She is moving. Sorry, Mary Ellen.
Okay, thank you. Oh, I see, because she had moved it. Thank you very much for picking up on that. Councillor Bosemore.
Thank you, Director Becking. I would suggest that you work with the Royal Muskoka Island Association. They have a fairly large representation of the owners on that property, and they may have some insight on to the appropriate locations.
Understood.
Thank you very much. Councillor Zavitz.
Thank you. Through you to Director Becking. Just a silly thought. That's how I roll. If we were not to post a speed limit sign, what is the perceived speed limit on that road? I mean, clearly it's an absolutely how do I say this? It's a tertiary sort of. It's a very specific road access for that particular group of people. If we were not to put a sign up there, does that revert to a common understanding? It is 30 or in our township? What is the ruling on that?
Director Becking.
Madam Chair, under the Highway Traffic Act, the speed limit on any road is assumed to be in accordance with the act unless posted otherwise. So in other words, 50 kilometer per hour is the assumed speed limit, and it's not necessary to put up a sign. If committee and council chooses to deviate from the requirements of the act, then it must be posted. And to that end, if there are not 40 kilometer an hour signs there now, there will be, in order to be in accordance with the act. So as part of the signing strategy that I've suggested, one of the things that I will be, or one of the things inherent within what I'm proposing to do, will be to make sure that we are signing the entirety of the roads in the area in accordance with the Highway Traffic Act.
Thank you. Okay, so I have read the resolution. I'm not seeing any other comments at this point. So at this point, I'd like to call the question. All those in favor? Thank you, that carries. Moving on to item 5D. Once again, Director Becking.
Thank you, Madam Chair. If I could start by asking the clerk to put up an aerial photograph that I had created. The photograph illustrates lands that are owned by the township, the two lots, lot 16 and lot 17, in concession 12 of the geographic township of Wood. Is the area at the top of the page in the red line. You can see Southwood Road, which is District Road 13. To the right-hand side and down towards the lower right corner is 9 Mile Lake Road. So that gives you a sense of the area that we're talking about. The cleared area in the photograph is known as the Southwood Road Pit. The lands in question are owned by the township. And it was an active pit that was used by the township up until the late 80s or early 90s. according to the research that I have done. In that time frame, the Aggregate Resources Act was changed, requiring that all pits, operating pits, be licensed according to the Act. At the time, there was a decision taken by staff and the council to not license this pit, and it has sat dormant since that time. I can tell you that the pit we have some security issues with people depositing garbage and debris and whatnot, notwithstanding the fact that the entrance into the pit is gated. Nonetheless, this pit is known to both the province through the Ministry of Natural Resources and to the Aggregate Resources Council, which is a industry body that is responsible for the regulation of these kinds of properties. Many pits across the province of Ontario have been abandoned over the years when they no longer have economic value. And the Aggregate Resource Corporation has a program whereby they will come in and rehabilitate some of these properties at no charge to the property owner in order to restore them to some semblance of naturalism. Recently, the township was approached by the corporation to determine if there was interest in pursuing rehabilitation of this pit. And so the issue before you is that the desired direction of committee and council? I would suggest to you that you have three options open to you. You can choose to do nothing, in which case the property stays as is and will continue to be as is. The second is to investigate naturalization of the pit through the MAP program. And at this point, all you're being asked to do is to authorize staff to pursue the matter further with TORAC in order to get details so that you can make a final decision. The third option, and actually there's a part A and a part B to it. As I've indicated in my earlier remarks, the pit is not licensed, but that does not mean necessarily that it doesn't have economic value. We do not know the extent of the aggregate deposit and whether or not it is worth further development. One option might be to investigate that, and if there is continued economic value to the property, then to go through the licensing process, which is, I won't say it's a simple process, but it is not an arduous process either. And that will establish its economic value or lack thereof. And then council could decide to either operate, if the aggregate is of value and useful to the township, to operate it either directly or indirectly by the township for its own purposes. Or in the alternative, you could put the property on the market and determine if there were interested purchasers who might want to purchase the property for its economic value, and then take those funds and put them into a reserve for future needs of the township, whatever that they may be, to be determined by the council of the day. So in summary, Madam Chair, at this point, the staff recommendation is to simply pursue further detail and with the TORAC to determine what what rehabilitation might look like, and then bring forward a more detailed recommendation to you at a later date.
Okay, thank you very much. Committee, any questions? Councillor Roberts and then Councillor Nishikawa. You're muted.
Thank you, Chair. Through you to Director Becking. Director Becking, would it be possible and feasible to pursue two routes? The one is to investigate with the rehabilitation of the property. The other route in parallel would be to assess the value and potential value of this property. Thank you.
Thank you. Director Becking.
Certainly, Madam Chair, that possibility does exist. We did, just for your information, broach the subject with TORAC, with the possibility of, could we rehabilitate and then sell the property off at a later date for its economic value as a source of aggregate. Their strong preference, of course, would be to not rehabilitate if the intention is to continue to operate the pit, because it would take away scarce resources from the rehabilitation of other pits. But certainly the councillor's suggestion is feasible and practical. I would point out that there are no funds in the department's budget in the current year for pursuing the investigation of the economic value of the property, and there would have to be either funds added to the budget, or in the alternative, a specific direction to proceed with funds to come from a reserve, and I would have to rely on the treasurer to give guidance as to how we might fund that investigative work.
Okay. Thank you. Councillor Nishikawa, I had noted your hand is down. I wanted to make sure I'm not. Do you still have a question?
I'm afraid that I would have to be a preamble, and I didn't want you to shut me down.
Okay, thank you. Question, Councillor Kent.
Thank you, Director Donaldson. I guess my natural inclination is that if a pit is not being used and we have the ability to rehab it, it would be great from an environmental perspective. And I've seen it done. It's really quite a thing they can do to make it look a lot better and community friendly and attractive, and birds and all those things. I would naturally go to that. On the other hand, the question I have is, if it were up and running and we could secure materials for our loose top roads from this site, is that likely to reduce our costs of providing those materials by a significant amount, or is it likely to just be neutral?
Thank you. Director Becking?
There is no question that if we were producing aggregates for ourselves, it would be at a lower cost. If for no other reason than that there is no profit in the equation. My experience in running aggregate operations in the past has been that we could produce aggregates based depending on the quality of the source for anywhere from 25 to 35% less expensive than would otherwise be the case. But again, it's a variable, and I've also seen it that we save 4 or 5%. At this point there are just too many variables to be able to give you a definitive answer.
Could I follow up?
Yes.
Just on the other hand, you'd still have to run the pit at break even to secure the 25 to 35% savings. So there'd be the cost of running the operation the people involved, which I assume we could do. We could run it at break even, the benefit being to us on an ongoing operating standpoint, the lower 25 to 30% costs. Am I right about that?
Madam Chair, again, essentially the councillor is correct. Under whether we buy the gravel from a private source or we run the pit at a break even, those costs, there are core costs that are the same under each equation. But again, at this point, we don't have enough information about the quality of the existing source to be able to make any definitive comments. So I really would caution committee to not get blinded by numbers until we have some decent detail on which to make a sound economic assessment.
Okay, thank you. I am going to ask our CAO to chime in as well as we talk about different properties and the possibility of economic viability. So CAO Hammond.
Thanks, Madam Chair. Good morning, members of the committee. And this, my comments are directed at part of Councillor Roberts' question. I believe where he was going was potential disposition of this property. And there was the notion of the need to do an evaluation of the property to determine its value. I'm mindful of Council's interest in assembling a compendium of the properties that we do own. We're working on that together with updating our disposition policy. I would suggest to Council that it may be more advantageous to look at the entire collection of properties we own and then prioritize which ones we want to sell off, and therefore also prioritize the dollars we spend on evaluations of properties on an annual basis ongoing in future years. So rather than take an incremental approach, I would suggest we take a more comprehensive approach in respect to land disposition. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Edwards, a question for Director Becking?
Yes, I would like to see us do a study and see how much aggregate is still left there, and that because we always need aggregate, sand and gravel, and that we have people asking for new pits. That's was an existing pit that could be reopened and used for and that by the township. I think we should see, maybe it's not worth and that it, but I think we should be prudent and check it out before we rehabilitate it. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you. Councillor Edwards, I just want to remind at this point we are asking questions, and that was more of a comment. So I just wanted to see if there was a question.
Then okay, then I will ask, and that Director Becking, what would it cost to do a study to find out how much is there? That's what I was getting at, basically.
Okay, thank you. Just a reminder, I'm trying to be consistent, okay. And I let you go on, but let's keep the questions as questions. Thank you, Director Becking.
At this point, Madam Chair, I would have to go out and get some advice from consultants and come back to you with a further report on the matter. I'm hesitant to provide you with any numbers.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Burry.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and through you to Director Becking. Just to confirm that if we were to even begin to entertain reopening this pit and run it, that we do not have the appropriate loader nor sorting equipment in township inventory, and so there would be a fair bit of startup capital cost associated with restarting the aggregate.
Madam Chair, the councillor is correct. We don't possess all of the requisite equipment. Typically in the past, we have rented that equipment, or at least in my past practice, I have rented equipment as necessary in order to develop a site. But if we were to run it as an ongoing day in, day out kind of operation, that kind of an approach would not make sense. So the councillor is correct. If it were to be run as an ongoing active operation, it would require a very considerable capital input.
Thank you. Councillor Zabitz?
Thank you. Through you to Director Becking. Just out of interest, why is this pit deemed no longer usable? At what point in time did the township decide it had been extracted? I mean, we're having this discussion about the viability of repurposing it, if you will. How do we know there's anything there? I mean, do we have any past history and or experiential advice on this from our own staff internally, in terms of, hey, the pit's done, it's over, or it's still viable?
Thank you. Director Becking?
Madam Chair, my understanding of the chain of events that occurred back in the 80s or 90s was that the staff of the day didn't feel that they wanted to go through the process of the licensure. It was deemed to be too onerous, and it was strictly a decision of not choosing to pursue the licensing process. It was, my understanding, it was not based on the presence or absence of an economically viable aggregate deposit.
Thank you. Any other questions for Director Becking? I'm seeing none, so allow me to read the resolution, and then I will open it up for question and comment or comments after. Moved by Councillor Roberts, seconded by Councillor Edwards. Be it resolved that participation in the management of abandoned aggregate properties program be authorized for the rehabilitation of the Southwood Road pit located in Lot 17, Concession 12, Township of Wood, and that the Director of Public Works be authorized to execute all documents necessary for participation in the program on behalf of the corporation. So before I get, okay, I would like to open up the floor for comments or debate at this point. Okay, I see Councillor Bosemuth, Councillor Kent, and Councillor Nishikawa.
Thank you, Chair. I have some personal experience in that the farm that I grew up had a gravel pit on it. And we used this organization to finish the gravel pit off, and it is now a cornfield. But before we did that, we had an excavator come in and do, not official, but get an idea of how much economic value we might have been missing. And it turns out there was very little or none. And so we went ahead. I think we need to understand what the economic potential value of this, whether it is for our own use or to sell the property and let somebody else use it. And we buy back the sand from them. But sand pits are hard to get, I think, in Ontario. And I think we should understand what this is worth before we decide to cover it up and rehabilitate it.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Ken?
I think that we ought to make sure that we do this in a comprehensive way, meaning there are 4 pits, is my understanding, that need to be looked at. And as Derek Hammond suggested, we should be doing a comprehensive plan before we make a decision on one in isolation. I agree with Councillor Bosenworth that the right thing to do is to get an assessment of whether there is any value, whether we sell it or not, but I don't think that should be done in isolation. We'll probably get a better rate from who's ever doing it if we assess all the other pits. Now, all the other pits, since I'm not knowledgeable, may not be as viable as this one is. But given that I don't know, I would suggest we make sure it's comprehensive review, and we shouldn't approve one in isolation. Thank you.
Okay. Councillor Nishikawa.
Thank you. I guess no surprise that I have a lot of experience about this property. and in fact was sitting on council when the decision was made, and that was in the 2000s. Interestingly, I'm not a big fan of overturning what other councils have done. They had the information in front of them at that time. But I would like council to consider the great opportunities that this property has for our own township. And our former mayor, Councillor Harding, and I had looked at this many, many years ago of what an opportunity, because other municipalities were looking at opportunities where ATV riders could be, all of those other types of activities that are happening in other municipalities. But this particular property was very suitable for that. And so many other things. I actually have been one of those people that have explored the property on a few occasions, sometimes by snowmobile. And yes, it's well known in the community. But even if you just put up the picture again, look at the opportunities to have a new hiking trail, look at the opportunities for a new dog park, like all of the other things that our township has, we've sort of put up, let's do this, it'd be a nice idea. But in fact, we don't. So I would like this to be sent back to whenever there's a recreation trails kind of discussion. But more importantly, I actually truly do believe in the Director of Public Works that was in that position for many, many, many years, that the financial viability from that area was very nil. And so I think that we should respect some of those decisions that were made in the past and not keep throwing money at something with hopes that you might make money. But I don't think you're going to make it from this particular property.
Okay, thank you. Mayor Kelley.
Thank you, and through you. I may have missed it, but I'm curious to know whether there was any sort of viability assessment done 8 years ago or whenever this was initially made, because unless technology for extraction has improved or the value of the resource has gone way up, I can't imagine that whatever work was done back then when the council originally made the decision to abandon has changed enough to make a material difference. I'm going to guess that these assessments aren't cheap. In fact, I'm pretty sure they're not cheap. And the third thing is no assessment on earth is going to tell us what the cost to us as a council and a township is when we roll into a neighborhood and decide we're going to open a pit. My experience is that the welcome wagon rarely shows up. So it would have to be, a pretty enormous opportunity for us not to recognize that this was abandoned once for good reason, like Councillor Nishikawa has suggested. I don't know what was done back then, but I'd be very surprised if at least there wasn't some consideration as to the value either to someone else or to us of continuing to extract. And unless something material has changed, Councillor Burry is right. The cost of running this pit and the social cost and the reputational cost of being associated with it are probably second only to running it as an ATV track. But I'll leave it there. Thank you.
Thank you. Sorry, I was trying to unmute myself there. Councillor Nishikawa.
Sorry, just through you to Director Becking, I don't think I made myself clear that I would like to see the rehabilitation of this pit take place. Thank you.
Okay, so I have put the resolution, sorry, just before is there any other comments from committee? So I have read, Councillor Boseworth.
I think I heard two reasons why this pit was closed. One was we didn't want to go through the process of licensing it. And the other one was perhaps there was some assessment on viability. But I don't think we know why it was closed. And I agree with Councillor Nishikawa. Should this not have any commercial value, I think there are lots of opportunities, and I think those are tremendous ideas. I'm also very cognizant of what Mayor Kelley has pointed out, and it might be a problem, but it seems to me that there might be some value. If there's a way that we can figure it out without spending a lot of money, I would be in favor of doing that in parallel with starting to explore filling it in.
Ask somebody else. Thank you. Thank you. And through you, Councillor Roberts.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I agree with my first point, supported by the Councillor Bosamorth, that if we can get in a preliminary investigation, is there any value? I guess I could ask a question of directly to Director Becking. Was there any? Did you find any assessment or any tangible reason why the previous council elected not to pursue the licensing? So that would be a question to Director Becking.
Okay, thank you, Director Becking.
Madam Chair, I was not able to find any records with respect to any formal assessments, and hence the reason why I've raised the issue. I can say anecdotally, based on information supplied to me by staff who were present at the time, the reason or rationale given for not continuing to operate the pit was the onerous nature of the licensing process. And as I say, all I can give you is the anecdotal information that's been supplied to me.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Okay, committee, any other last questions or comments? Seems like there's two different pathways here, so I might actually just do a quick poll, because I have read the resolution as it stands right now, which is to direct the Director of Public Works to be authorized for the rehabilitation. So just a straw poll for how I've read the resolution as it is. Could everybody give me a sense? Is that something you would support? And the alternative is that we would be also at the same time exploring the economic viability of this property. So that would be an amendment to this resolution. So I'd like to just get a straw poll from the group to say, are we comfortable just proceeding with the resolution as I've read it, or do we want to amend it? And I see that Councillor Nishikawa, before I do a straw poll, I'll give her another opportunity to speak.
I'm sorry, I find it difficult with what is being put in front of us, and there's no dollar figure. So we're just saying, find out what the financial viability is, but we haven't said how much money we're willing to throw at this to find out that viability. And, you know, we all know consultants and everybody else is pretty pricey. So I would have preferred not to have that piece in here unless we're going to put a dollar figure on it, because I don't want to, you know, I don't want to go and spend $30,000-$50,000. I don't, that's not where I want to spend money today.
Thank you. And that's a great clarification, because I guess the other option is we could postpone to allow staff to come back with a little further information, so we would understand what would be the cost of doing a study versus the actual viability of the pit. So thank you for catching that. I'm now seeing Councillor Edwards and Zavitz. I will allow both of you guys to speak, and then I'm going to come back to what the specific resolution and next steps are, because the possibility exists for us to postpone this to allow staff to come back with a little bit more information for us. So Councillor Edwards.
I would and that agree with that. We should come back from staff. But, you know, probably if you talk to some of the sand and gravel people, they could look at it and they could say, yeah, I think it would be viable even without doing tests. And if they did, then you do the tests and that. And as far as us operating it, rather than selling it for sand and gravel, then we could then take it out slowly over the years. And that where if a commercial operation goes in there, they would be just taking as much as they possibly could as quick as possible. So it's there. And I would also ask Director Becking, when he comes back, how much are we spending on sand and that gravel over the year? So we'll know just what could be involved. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, Councillor Zavitz.
Thank you. Through you, I guess picking up on Councillor Nishikawa's commentary, were we to, at some point in time in the future, decide that this would be a great addition to our Parks and Trails network, my sense is, knowing the property the way I do, you know, if it was going to be an ATV and other vehicle usage point, you probably wouldn't need to rehabilitate the place at all, to my point, knowing what people like to do. So I wonder if I could direct a question to Director Becking in terms of, am I correct? We don't have it isn't a licensed pit now. So that is out unless we spend X amount of money, which some of the other councillors are asking for you to pursue that or check into that further. If we were to status quo this thing and make it part of our Parks and Trails network, what would the cost be to that? Is there any cost other than some signage?
Thank you, Director Becking.
Madam Chair, I'll be honest with you. I have not set my mind to what an alternate use of the property might be and what that would entail. So I would have to pursue that further in order to be able to answer the councillor's question.
Okay, thank you. I do see Mayor Kelley, you have your hand up.
Thank you, and through you. Yeah, it's a question actually for Director Becking. I don't know the geography as well as I should, but this looks like it's awful close to the Torrance Barrens, and I'm going to guess that some of the activities we're contemplating here might create conflict with the Barrens and its need for, no? Okay. I want to get it on the table, that's all. Don't want to forget it. So Director Becking, I see some people who know better than I are disagreeing with my assumption, but I'm curious to know whether this is going to put any kind of relationship risk in place with the Barrens and the kind of appropriate use of the nearby land.
Thank you. Director Becking, did you have a comment?
Madam Chair, I think that anything that, you know, or the suggested uses that have come up in this discussion are not consistent with the aims and objectives of the Torrance Barrens. And so I see the two as mutually exclusive, quite frankly. That's my personal opinion, but you know, we probably should investigate that further before pursuing any specific course of action.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Bosemuth, another question.
Chair, another suggestion is, I think what precipitated this coming to committee was that I forget the name of the organization that does the rehabilitations, but they came to us asking if we'd like to do it. That option remains open at any time. And so one of the options we could do on this is just postpone it and make it and just roll it into the comprehensive review of our of the owned properties, and that would give Director Becking and the staff some time to get some of these more fulsome analysis and cost analysis that we've been asking of them. So that's an option too.
Right. So, Director Becking, thank you very much for that. Good summary. I had written down that it seemed like there's some options that that the director could come back to us with. And I just want to make sure that we are clear that if we were to postpone this decision right now, it's with the intention of having a better understanding of the property, not on its own even, but as a more comprehensive plan. But specific to this property, it feels like there was 3 different options. One being that we could rehab it to create space for more passive recreation, as I think you noted in your report. Two is we could leave it as is, as noted by one of, I think, Councillor Zavitz, and just maybe change some things as is at a pretty low cost. But the third is also to understand the economic viability of that property, and are there different options? So I think with that direction, Director Becking, is that something that you could come back to this committee with at a future? Just knowing that that MAP program, like, we're not saying no to that as a whole, but we would like to see it as part of a more fulsome discussion.
Madam Chair, that is entirely appropriate direction for committee if that's what you choose. My understanding is that the organization TORC has come to us offering this as an option. There, to the best of my knowledge, there's no time limit on it, although an approval would be required now if the work were to be included in their annual program. But that doesn't mean to say that it couldn't come forward at a later date, another year or 2 or 3.
Okay.
So
thank you. Okay, thank you very much for that. Committee, I am looking at the time, and our acting clerk is asking for a little bit of time to write an amended resolution. So if I could ask that we come back, I'll give us our 15-minute break now at 10:50. We will read the amended resolution at that point. Okay, so I will see everybody after break at 10:50. Thank you, committee. Just welcome back. So at this point, I am going to read a resolution that we have amended at this point. So please listen, and then we will be voting on this amended resolution. Moved by Councillor Roberts, seconded by Councillor Edwards, be it resolved that the resolution be postponed pending receipt of a report from the Director of Public Works in response to direction received from committee. All those in favor? Okay, thank you. That's carried. Thank you.
Together, you don't have to sign that one.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Director Becking. And at this point, I'd like to move on to item 6A. Our Director of Financial Services, Mr. Donaldson, are you with us? Director Donaldson?
I am.
Thank you. I'd like to turn the floor over to you for item 6A, please.
Thanks, Chair. In accordance with council policy, I'm pleased to present to you today an unaudited preliminary year-end financial report for the fiscal year ended December 31st, 2022. The financial audit to be conducted by the audit firm BDO this year has started, and staff expect the final audited report will be ready for presentation to committee in late spring or early summer. The report notes an operating deficit this year of $160,330. In Q3, for the report in December, I presented a Q3 report to committee, and staff had forecasted to come in very close, but within budget this year. And however, the impacts of the significant weather event experienced over the Christmas season required higher than anticipated resources than what were reflected in the report at that time, and was a key contributor to this year-end preliminary deficit position. That said, staff were able to manage most of the cost pressures during the year with savings from other areas and higher than budgeted non-tax revenue. And the results are within 1% of the budgeted levy for 2022. The result speaks to the efforts of staff over the past number of years to bring the budgeted levy to a level that reflects the most efficient and effective use of financial resources while retaining some flexibility to mitigate some of the pressures that we experience over the year. The report also describes some of the key reasons for the operating expense variances by both expense category and by division, both against the 2022 budget and against the 2021 actuals. With respect to capital expenditures, the expenditures were less than budgeted due to some projects being deferred or canceled, while others were completed at a cost that were lower than budget. As noted in committee's recent budget discussions, all capital is funded from reserves and reserve funds. This year's capital spending outpaced contributions to reserve and reserve funds by approximately $2 million. And the final report on reserve and reserve fund balances will be presented to committee as part of the audited financial report to be received later this year. And with that, I will open it up to questions, Chair. Thank you.
Well, thank you very much, Director Donaldson. Committee, any questions? I'm not seeing any questions. Any comments? I know there's not a resolution to be read. This was for information. Mayor Kelley.
Thank you very much, and through you. I think this is a really good story when you take a look at the second and third largest expense items, contract services, materials and equipment being the second, utilities and facility maintenance being the third, and looking at frankly, the impact largely, I think it's not overconsumption, it's actually expensive consumption of the impact of inflation. We had a 28% increase last year in fuel costs, and that's from Stats Canada. That's not locally. I think it was higher locally. Depends obviously when you buy and when you procure and use, but this is a really good news story in terms of a management team, a senior leadership team, obviously including the CAO, that kept the budget close, tight, awful tight, in light of in spite of the fact that the expenditures on contract services, materials, and equipment were, for instance, a 50% hit above budget. So my comment is just simply full credit to the leadership team for keeping it this close. There was there are a lot of industries and a lot of businesses that took a major battering last year, and it takes some really careful management to make sure that we didn't fall into that group. Our miss is less than 1%. I think I heard Director Donaldson say versus plan. I think that's to the credit of our leadership team. So thank you.
Well, thank you very much. Councillor Bosemorth and then Councillor Kent.
Having to close books many, many times on a company, I'd just like to congratulate Director Donaldson for producing such a fulsome report and getting the results out so quickly.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Kent.
Thank you. In the vein of no questions or stupid questions, which we have discussed a few times recently, can I ask you a few questions, Director Donaldson? These are just dumb ones. How much cross-charging, you referenced once in here, the cross-charging, and this is in the financial results by division, staff costs from internal chargebacks. How much cross-charging do you have in creating the divisional statements? Is this a unusual activity, or is there a lot of that and keeping track of it? I'm always skeptical looking at results by division. And my second question is a very simple one, which is the line transfers to reserves, grants and subsidies, an unbudgeted item, but then an actual. Is that something you've changed the way you do it, and going forward you'll be budgeting and tracking against it? Or is it the way, why do we do it that way is my question. So 2 questions. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. Director Donaldson.
Thank you, and through the chair. So with respect to the first question around internal chargebacks, that is done primarily through the area of Public Works. So Public Works has a time and equipment system, and what they do is they apportion their activities through timesheets, and then that activity has a charge out rate that gets charged across the organization, and that's in an attempt to match up the activities and the costs associated with that with the actual operation of that particular unit. So you might have people on the roads crew that is doing work in another area, or parks crew that might be working in the township parking lot or at a community center. So it's mainly through the Public Works area that's done.
Right. Okay. Thank you.
On the second question. So when we did the 2022 budget, we just really ignored the impact of all the grants that we were receiving that were being used for capital. And the reason we did that was because it was really just a flow through. But when we actually do the accounting, we actually flow it through operating to get to capital. So that's why the actuals show a number against no budgeted number. We are changing that. So for the 2023 budget, we will show both contributions to reserves from grants and contributions to reserves from the tax levy.
Thank you. That'll make it easier to read the statement when you pull out the $2.5 million and you can compare apples to apples. Appreciate that. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Zavitz.
Thank you. Through you to Mark. I just, in the interest of understanding, so if I look at, again, and thank you for the report, the professional fees and honoraria, if I wind myself way back to the right column, 2021 actual, in fact, in 2021, it was over by $167,000. So the expectation would have been that we as a township might have required, whatever the difference is, which is what, 290,000. Somehow we've gone in 2021 with an expectation of perhaps we might have had a let's say $275,000 professional fee and honoraria to where we actually have let's call it 600,000, if you will. Is that an expectation for our budget when we get together next week? Some of these categories have had quite quantum increases, and that would be to bills like things like Bill 23 and other legal. I mean, I've read your notes. So that has to do with legal fees, et cetera. Is that something we should be, well, obviously being aware of, but be paying more attention to?
Director Donaldson?
Yeah, through the chair, I'm just wondering, could I ask the councillor, can you just clarify? I'm not sure what the question is with respect to.
Yeah, well, so if I go to the right column, 2021 actual for professional fees and honoraria, which, as I read your notes, indicates costs of legal fees amongst other things, correct?
Yeah, the significant increase in 2022 under professional fees costs for the election, which were covered off by transfers from the reserve, are included in that line. So we would have an increase in 2022 that we would not expect to see repeated in 2023, for example. Related to that, there's also costs related to consultants, audit fees, and those types of things that are also in that line.
Yeah. But I guess my point, and thank you for that, of course, but back in 2021, which isn't all that long ago, the actual expenditure for that category was $421,000, which was $167,000 over the previous year. So in 2020, our previous council was supportive of a, I don't know, $260,000 fee and honoraria amount. It actually came in at 421, and then at 22, it was actually 588. So my question is that the kind of thing we should be? Clearly, there's going to be some highlighted areas where we're going to need to focus. For example, should we be having in-house counsel? I mean, if we're going to spend $300,000 to $500,000 more in a category, is that something we should be looking at? So additional resources, that kind of thing.
Just thank you, and Director Donaldson. I am going to turn this over to you, but I just one comment in there. I just wanted to be clear in the final column that says under and over prior year. Is that to 2021 to 2020 or 2021 to 2022?
Thank you, Chair. And I was going to clarify. So that column is the increase in 2022 over 2021. That's the 588 right over the 421. So there's no reference point to 2020 in this report.
Okay, thank you. And then I don't know if you had any further comment on to Councillor Zavitz.
No, so I don't have the 2020 professional fees, but as I mentioned, I think the costs as budgeted took a spike in 2022, but they would retract somewhat in 2023. I think we would expect that with the absence of the election, for sure, we would see some cost offsets there going forward.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Roberts.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and through you to Director Donaldson, and please let me know if I'm off subject here, because we are talking about the results of 2022. But I was very interested when Councillor Kent mentioned cross-coding, and that to make sure that the costs get associated to the right thing from departments. And everyone received a report from a CAO Hammond in December that listed 30 plus projects that we're working on. And that is operations staff that is being performed those work. And I'm asking through you, Madam Chair, if Director Donaldson would consider capturing that information as early as 2023 or in 2024 of the amount of staff work, staff operation time is spent on specific projects, because we really don't have a handle on how much a specific project is costing us. So that's just for consideration. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, Director Donaldson, did you have any comments on that, or?
Yep. No, thank you, Chair. So we don't currently have a mechanism to track time for administrative staff. So the tool that is used for public works is specifically through CityWorks. We don't have something that expands beyond the public works area that would require investment in some kind of time system to keep track of who's doing what when, and processes associated with that. So we're 3 months into, or 2.5 months into, no, we're 1.5 months, excuse me. We're only 6 weeks into 2023. I wouldn't see that being something we could do for 2023, and it would be something that if we were going to embark on that would have to take place in 2024 or at some subsequent time after that.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Kent? Oh, you're muted.
Sorry. I would just comment on, I don't see the value, given the size of the individual groups, to spend a lot of time improving your costing between divisions. It's important, I agree with you, for the building department, because that's such a large percentage of the budget, but it would be a waste of everybody's time and resources to allocate admin time and IT time and HR time. It's such small numbers. I think there's a lot of better ways to spend our time and money. It's helpful to see it by division, but you're not going to draw a lot of conclusions about the profitability of any of our little administrative departments. I don't see that unless we start tracking, the bylaw department on a inflows and outflows basis, but I don't think they're using a lot of other people's time apart from maybe some admin staff. We're not running them as cost centers, unless I'm missing something.
Okay, Director Donaldson, do you have any comment?
Thank you, Chair. I mean, I would concur to the extent that it would be a large undertaking for limited information gained by doing so. I mean, it would give us a little bit more insight, but I think overall, Public Works and I appreciate the reminder. We also do cost allocations for building and for the library as well, just to make sure that we are tracking those, because they are a little bit different than the other in-house departments. But yeah, it would be a larger undertaking. It would give us a little more insight, but probably I'm not sure how much it would affect decision making.
Thank you. Any other questions or comments, committee? I just do want to reinforce a bit of a common theme here, that great work, Director Donaldson, on a great report here, but extend that beyond to our senior leadership team and, quite frankly, the entire organization to help manage through such a tumultuous year. Once again, it feels like, and to be able to deliver the services we did, and come back with this kind of a prudent, I would say, approach and management of the budget has been appreciated. So thank you very much for all of your time. That said, I'm going to move on our agenda now. Thank you, Director Donaldson. Moving on to item 7, our Community Services Public Library Board minutes. Committee, do you have any questions as to the minutes or the report? No? Okay, seeing none, I'd like to accept those on the record. Thank you very much. And we will move on now to item 8A, asking our Economic Development Officer, please, to walk us through our Community Improvement Plan review. Welcome, Mr. Moore.
Yes, thank you, Chair Mazan, and good morning, committee. Committee will recall this report on the Community Improvement Plan is a continuation of some discussions we started at last month's meeting. In particular, staff were directed to report back on the processes to extend or add to the CIP boundaries themselves, and the policy regarding the administration guidelines respecting the funding streams. I guess to highlight in short, can both be changed? The answer is yes. The process in which to do so is a little bit different as it relates to the policy itself. It's a little bit simpler. Those would be bringing back the specific amendments to the policy itself in a subsequent staff report. As it speaks to the CIP boundaries and the updating of that bylaw, it's a little bit more cumbersome. and follows the planning process in which we would have to provide notice to the public, hold a public meeting upon a decision, and if approved, forward on that approval to the upper tier government for their approval as well. We were able to reach out to the consultant to discuss some of these questions regarding the boundary areas and changes to the policy itself on the administration side of the program. I think the report itself highlights some of the comments from the consultant as to why these specific areas or boundaries were identified. And I think in discussing with them, they just wanted to make sure if we were considering any changes at this point, we definitely just want to be cognizant of the relative size of those CIP areas themselves and the number of properties in them, the amount of funds available to support the number of properties, and if such a change is desirable, the potential to receive similar requests from other businesses, other properties, or other communities in the township as well. With all that, I think in discussing with the consultant and staff, we're definitely aware that we've just started this program. We're about 4 months into it. We've had a couple early applications. And at this time, we'd recommend proceeding with the first year, at which time we could certainly report back, evaluate the first year, the applications we received, and at that time consider any changes we want to make, just understanding kind of the process to go through to make these changes. We'd certainly kind of rather do it once rather than multiple times and make sure we get it right. And we think there's definitely going to be some learning over the course of this first year, but if we can give it some time and then report back at the end of the year and consider any changes heading into the 2024 year. With that, your chair, I'm happy to answer any questions.
Yeah, thank you very much, Mr. Moore. Committee, any questions? Councillor Zavitz.
Well, here we go. Okay, well, thank you, and through you, and not so much to Corey, certainly just as a general comment.
Sorry, this is just questions right now, and then I'll read the resolutions and then we can have comments.
Well, I'm hoping that my that my questions will actually affect your resolution. So if I could proceed.
So how it works is let's ask questions that relate to the report. I'll read the resolution, and similar to what we just did, we can amend the resolution afterwards. And I know this is a little bit different than how we were doing it historically, but I guess according to Robert's rules, this is the process to follow. So right now I'm just asking about questions to the report. I'll read the resolution, and then if we want to either amend or postpone, like we just did on the other one, then that's absolutely an option. So I just want to make sure that that's clear. Okay, I see. Councillor Zavitz, no question then on the report? No. Okay. Councillor Nishikawa.
Thank you. My question would be through you to Corey. How do we recognize businesses that have been historically businesses for 30 plus years in a community that were deleted from, I'll just say Bala? We left out major businesses, and I'm just not sure how the direction or that we should go. I know there's been an ask, but the direction that other businesses should go to get recognized, because I didn't hear that we were going to recognize them even this year.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Moore?
Certainly, I think in discussing with the consultant, going through this process, the focus was certainly on the density of the downtown cores themselves, and trying to keep that CIP boundary area as tight as possible so that we can have a larger impact with the funds that we do have available in that area. And I know in talking with the consultant in Bala in particular, I know we've discussed the extension to Moon River Road possibly, and the addition of a few properties there were brought up last month. And I think the consultant had just spoke to, and it's identified in the report, that they saw the urban area kind of starting at the Ballast Sports Pucks, and they really saw that as kind of the gateway to the community and to the downtown core, and that we certainly want to focus on that density tight area so that there's an impact over the long term on the vitality of the downtown.
Okay, thank you. I see Councillor Nishikawa, a new question or a supplemental? And then the Councillor Kent.
Sorry, I would like to just follow up from that answer. Again, I'm concerned that our consultants don't live here and they actually don't appreciate the community, but how do we change the opinion of the consultants and or council to actually recognize these businesses that have always been here and are part of the core? So again, how do we get this council to recognize that the consultants that are making these decisions for us actually don't have a stake in the game?
Okay. I'm not sure if that was, is there a new question in there? I don't think so for Mr. Moore. It's the, I think we're still debating that one boundary. Okay. I will continue to move on, and then we can always circle back with more questions. Councillor Kent and then Councillor Zavitz.
Okay, first I apologize. My Wi-Fi went out, so I missed, very entertainingly, I missed Councillor Zavitz's comments. I believe I know what they were. I'm of the view that the definition that we use of the urban service area, which is consistent, we have a definition, it applies to Ballot, applies to Port Carling, is what we ought to be using in this case. I think that again, rather than having a discretionary border, we have a definition that's been used in the past for many other activities, and it would be a lot more sensible to use something that nobody can question. Yes, you're going to say, do I have a question?
Correct. Sorry. I thank you. And I know you were kicked out. We're still at the question period. So Councillor Zavitz actually hasn't even asked his question yet either. So
okay, well then I'll wait. Yeah, I thought Councillor Zavitz asked a question already. I missed what he spoke about.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you. Okay,
I guess the question, here's the question. Why would realize they want to have a tighter boundary, but why wouldn't consultants use a definition that we already have in place that would require no argumentation from community members? That's very simple. And I realize this is not something that has to be done or changed today. We could wait till 2024, as we have limited applications this year anyway, but I do think it's a matter that needs to be dealt with.
So the definition of the border, now I see Director Pink coming on board. Okay, Director Pink.
Thank you, Chair, through you, and good morning, still morning, committee. Just thought I'd jump in, as it's somewhat more of a planning related question that Mr. Moore may not be as familiar with. But the official plan does define the boundaries of both Ballot and Port Carling, the urban centers. And within those two urban centers, the official plan also identifies certain sub-designations, including what you would call the downtown, or what we call in the official plan the community core. And if you look at the community core boundary in the official plan with the boundary that the consultants have identified in the community improvement plan, they do largely line up. There are some deviations, but it's largely to extend to township-owned properties such as the Ballast Sportsplex or Hannah's Park in Port Carling, to include those areas so they can be part of the comprehensive plan. But the businesses, or the really the privately owned properties in the community improvement plan, largely do coincide with the community commercial core boundary in our official plan, save for, again, perhaps some slight deviations as to what constitutes really the entry or the gateway into both communities, but they do largely lined up with those boundaries. So I just wanted to comment again further. I think Councillor Nishikawa commented that businesses were being deleted. Businesses aren't deleted from the plan. A boundary had to be identified. Again, it lines up with the official plan designation, and it's really to support more of the buildings within those areas to support a thriving and vibrant downtown core. Unfortunately, you'll always have to set a boundary, and there will be properties or businesses outside of that boundary. That's the nature of the beast. If we were to extend it now, there would still be certain businesses and properties outside said boundary that might be looking for further extensions. And I think council and committee need to be cognizant of that and trying to be supportive of a program that that we can financially support and make sure it's prosperous rather than quickly expanding the boundary, and hence staff's suggestion that we retain the boundary at this time and could certainly reevaluate. The last thing I would just note is keep in mind it is a public process to establish said boundary, and the community improvement plan went through that public process. There was a lot of public engagement, consultation, and ultimately council passed those boundaries. So just wanted to point that out. If we do look to expand them, as Corey, Mr. Moore mentioned earlier, we will have to again go through that public process to change the boundary. Hope those comments are helpful.
Thank you. Councillor Zavitz.
Well, thank you, and through you, not to upset your process, I do have a lot of comments to make, and they're getting said anyway. But if what you have to do is read the resolution first, I would ask you to please read it, and then I do have a lot of commentary. I would phrase everything as a question for you. I'll just raise the inflection of my voice at the very end, and that'll be the questions. Because
well, I think you just asked. No, but
it's really important here. We got, if I might respectfully, we got the director of public David Pink sitting here telling us how it works, and it's, you know what, it didn't work that way. It's not working that way right now. So I would ask you to go ahead and read the resolution.
Sorry, that's what I was going to ask you. I think you asked me to read the resolution, and then I was just going to suggest that I'll make sure that you're the first person to speak. And at that point, you don't have to have an inflection. So allow me to read this, and then I will call on you as the first person to comment. Moved by Councillor Burry, seconded by Councillor Zavitz. Be it resolved that no changes be made to the community improvement plan boundary or the related policy at this time. At this point now, I'd like to open up the floor for comments, and I would ask Councillor Zavitz to lead.
Thank you for that. I do have some comments, and I do have some concerns. And certainly, I don't think any of us appreciated the last round that the CIP was going to be this onerous. I thought it was a working, breathing, continuous improvement sort of scenario. I understand it's new, and should we be looking at changing it already? There are 4 business. Well, first of all, the one precept of the whole CIP was to shine light on the businesses that are open all year round. We excluded 4 businesses in Bala that are open year round. I mean, that was the intent. I don't believe it was the intent. These businesses that we've excluded, and the names are Pratt's Garden and Landscape Center, Bala Storage and Driving Range, Bala Garden and Landscape Center, and Pengilly's Hardware. We've only excluded 4. But we have excluded them. We've not included them this year. These are businesses that are open 365 days a year, except for holidays. So these are the exact businesses and the concept that we're trying to execute with CIP, which is to give as much attention as we can to our businesses being open for the traveling public and for the residents on a longer basis. A few interesting things. They are all on water and sewer for the town. So they are part of the town. Okay, there should be no. We've created a full border at both sides of Bala. I'm not going to speak to Port Carling because that's not where I got elected. But at Bala's heart, there is 3/4 of a mile of Highway 169, rocks, water, and at minimum, are you ready for this? 6 bridges. Okay, that impacts where businesses could even at the beginning of time be situated. So I guess my point is that Bala doesn't really have a deemed defined downtown. And I use the words in the letters in my own mind, CIP. It's a community improvement plan. It's not a downtown improvement plan. Maybe we blew it with the references. There's only 650 people on the board in Bala. Okay, businesses are impacted by exclusion. And I'm just saying that these people are open all year round. I don't have a reason when they all call me, and they have, I can't come up with a reason why we excluded them. They are in the town. In fact, as you go to the Pratt's, and you go to the one, I hate to use the word end, because it's over after that. After the Bala Post Office and OPP shared building, then the Bala Sports Park, right next door is the Bala Storage Court and driving range that they've just spent an incredible amount of money on developing. Across the road is Pratt's Landscaping, who had Christmas activities, as did Bala Garden Center at the other end with the Farleys. I can put names to these businesses. Guys, please, I can't imagine we would not extend the boundary in Bala to include the businesses that we've excluded. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Committee, any other comments? Councillor Kent.
Sorry, I'm struggling with a data system here that's not giving me a lot of support. I agree with Councillor Zavitz, and I would say, and I'm not, when you use the definition of urban service area versus downtown, and I appreciate what Director Pig referenced, you do pull in up to Peninsula Road, from Foodland up to Peninsula Road in Port Carling. And I just believe for simplicity, we haven't had a huge number of applicants. We've had 2 applicants, of which I don't like either of them, and I will be discussing that at the next meeting. I don't like either of them, but by revisiting the policy at some point, I think that we should address the definitions and some of the clarity related to qualification in the policy. I think we should address the maximum amounts for certain expenditures. And I think we definitely should address the urban service area. I don't have any great problem with waiting 1 more year to do that, but I think if we're going to change it in Bala, we change it in Port Carling, and you make it a consistent definition that everyone knows. And I realize there's a public policy process, but there are a bunch of problems with this particular policy that I think could be rectified, improved on a sober second look, if you want to look at it that way, even though I guess it would be a 4th look rather than a second look.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Boseworth.
Thank you, Chair. Councillor Zavitz has made a very logical and passionate argument for including some businesses, and I would support that. I also support what Councillor Kent has said, that we're really early into this cycle, and do we want to throw it into another public process this early into the cycle? We don't have a lot of applicants yet, and I agree with Councillor Kent. There's some attributes about this improvement plan that I don't particularly like, and so we're a new council. I think we should just decide when we're going to reassess and include all these points when we do that reassessment.
Okay, thank you. Just a quick comment. I wanted to ask Mr. Moore if we do have other applicants. I think that I've heard that we don't have many, and I think that's not something I've heard from staff. So I just wanted, given we've just started this, are there other applicants for this year?
So we've had 2 come through to committee. I currently have 1 application that's just recently been submitted, and we've held 15 pre-consultation meetings with local businesses. So I'm expecting some more applications to come, but I think we do have to understand that these applications and the projects that these businesses and properties are looking to do involve a little bit more time and planning. They certainly have to work around, their operating schedules, etc. So there's certainly, I think, some good ideas in the chamber, if you will say. So I think that's why staff have recommended if we can give it a year, kind of evaluate, see how things go. It'll give us a little bit of a better understanding when we're deciding on these changes to make.
Thank you. Councillor Edwards, Councillor Roberts, and then Councillor Zavitz, and then we'll see where that goes.
Okay, thank you very much. I will support what the staff are saying, that leave it, the boundaries the way they are. It's a downtown improvement area. If we start expanding out, we should do the whole township, because there are other businesses that people go to in Milford Bay, in Windermere, and Bent River, and everything else like that. So we came up with that. It wasn't changed at that time, and I would support it, and we can look at it again in another year. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Roberts.
Thank you, Madam Chair. And a comment, but spawned by Mr. Moore's comment that there's a lot of interest appears for these grants. I think we got to do a immediate review of the policy. I took it out last night and read it in detail, and it is very, very loose in the definition of what falls under mechanical. In the rationale, it talks about more small examples where we may help. But I think it's, if we're giving out this kind of money, there should be better guidelines. And I think that's got to be done as soon as possible, because to provide a hard-earned taxpayer money in a period of time where we got to tighten our belt on that. I, for one, think that the community improvement plan should be seriously considered again. Thank you.
Okay.
So I guess I better propose something here, is that I propose that we look at the criteria under the incentive plans for businesses, exactly what this council would be comfortable with, and go from there before we do many more approvals or have them come to committee.
Okay. Councillor Zavitz, Councillor Kent.
Thank you, through you. So certainly supportive of this, like we rehearsed this. Councillor Roberts, I do certainly agree that this needs to be looked at. I do not agree with Councillor Edwards, but we all have our opinion. You've mentioned Bent River more than once. That is not the spirit of this discussion. The spirit of this discussion is very specifically Bala and Port Carling. And I think we need to keep our attention focused on that. I picked up on something from Corey where 2 people have actually had, at this point in time, successful applications, and 15 have come forward to discuss it. Is that, and I guess perhaps that's a question, or perhaps I could just phrase it as a comment. Should that concern us? Does that speak to Councillor Roberts' point that, we haven't created a program that's set up for success? If 2 out of 17 people that applied, 15 are still on the sidelines for I'm sure a plethora of reasons. So I would certainly support a relook at this thing sooner than later and not waiting a year. Thank you.
Okay, Councillor Kent.
I would also support a review of it in scope, not just the change in definition, from downtown to urban service area, which encapsulates the problem. But I do think that if you have 15 other applicants and you gave one of our first applicants, which I'm going to object to, $25,000, you'd be done with the whole thing with 6 applicants. Okay, I think the amounts are too high per applicant, given that we may have 15 applicants. And I think the definitions are too vague and don't support the objectives. And therefore, I would move that we need to just do a review. It's not a significant review. These are a couple of edits, in my opinion. And if that means we have to take it to a public meeting, we're just making it a more useful program. And so I do support Councillor Roberts moving forward sooner rather than later on changing or reviewing the policy.
Okay, am I seeing any other comments? At this point, I have read this resolution. I think what we've heard from staff is their preference would be that we allow this program, seeing as we've just launched it, to continue and come back with a series of lessons learned at the, like, after we've had a chance to actually live through, because I think their sense is that there may be other items that they would add to that list in advance. So that staff's a preference, and that's what's written into this resolution. I think there's two different processes. One is if we want to just revisit the policy outside of the boundaries, we can probably look at that internally, and I'm looking to Mr. Moore just to validate that. We'd be able to have those discussions. If we were looking to revisit the boundaries, we would have to take that portion out to the public. I just want to make sure I'm clear. Is that correct?
That's correct, yes.
Okay. So at this point, I have read this resolution. Is the request that we amend this resolution, and I'm just going to do a straw poll to immediately start, or to provide direction to staff to come back with a timeline as to when they could amend it, but still allow the actual program to be unfolding as is, or do we want to postpone this completely? And I think I see Mayor Kelley and then Councillor Nishikawa.
I don't, we've gone through an extensive process to get where we are. We're never going to get it perfect, perhaps. And in the full seasoning of time, we'll learn stuff to do it better. But I really subscribe to the staff recommendation that this is a relatively new program, if I'm not mistaken, 4 months, something like that, that it deserves to run. It's been through countless layers of approval already, and suddenly we woke up, we weren't paying attention the first 3 times it was read to us and we voted on it. I'm finding that a bit of a challenge to get comfortable with. I think this deserves a runway. I think we're into it. We will learn more through the course of this year. I will not countenance attacking people making applications. Let's attack the policy all we want. And let's make sure we come back. You know, I can't wait till the day when we have the energy for forward-looking things, as opposed to going back and revisiting early council decisions, whether it's last year or a gravel pit 10 years ago. At some point in time, unless there's a meaningful reason, this thing was set to run for a year. I think it runs for a year. We've got applications currently underway. We've got a dozen or more interested parties who are working up whatever they need to do to subscribe. And I think in the fullness of a year, we'll make a much better decision than we would if we just run back today and vote on it a 4th time in 4 months or 6 months. There's got to be at some point a certainty. And I realize we're going to make mistakes and we're going to be able to go back and amend the record or make things better. But at some point in time, I think our constituents deserve the certainty of at least knowing, whether they like it or not, what the expectations are. And I don't think we are fulfilling that obligation right now particularly well after just a 4-month run on something that has been exhaustively considered by several layers, committees, and council, and also by a public consultation process. You know, we own this. It wasn't the consultants who made these decisions. They were, you know, used by us to help develop the proposal, but acting independently and giving due consideration, this project has not been given an opportunity to run 1 year yet. And I think at the end of the year would be a much more appropriate time to sit down and understand what changes we need, tweaks we need, boundary descriptions we need to amend. I think it's we're running around right now trying to do it too soon.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Nishikawa, and then Councillor Kent, I'll give you one. I think you've had 2 chances, so I'll give you one more, but I haven't heard from Councillor Nishikawa yet.
Thank you. I agree with a lot of the comments that were made by Councillor Kent, and I was concerned about the amounts that we did approve. Having said that, I don't want to amend this bylaw, and in fact, I'm even now having to look into sort of deeper thoughts of how often we're going to do this. Like every resolution that we read, are we then going to amend it? Because I think there's a rule about that in fact, you might have to have 2/3 votes that others want that included. So I don't want to, sorry, I'm hearing other voices. May I continue? I really don't want to make changes to the resolution today, and I will vote accordingly. And I won't be voting for it at this point. I do believe that we have some, and we saw an error we did many years ago, and in fact, an applicant was really good at happened to be a lawyer and knew all the ways to get about it, and in fact gained a large amount of money, not necessarily from this council or anything, but I just want to say that we're always going to run against up to people that figure out another way around things, and but I'm just not happy with the outcome at this point, so I would not be voting in favor.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Kent, last word, and I think then we will call the question. Oh, you're muted.
Thank you for letting me have one more comment. I don't disagree with Mayor Kelley that we could wait through the year and look at it next year. And I realize I'm a new councillor, and I've just looked at something for the first time, and I did spend quite a bit of time on this over the last month. My concern is twofold. If you wait a year, I'm worried, was the intention when you set this up that you were going to put $150,000 into this every year? Because if each grant is $25,000, you're going to be done with this with 15 applicants very quickly. And I don't know if that was the intention. If the intention was we're going to do an annual $150,000, then I'm not going to, have as much problem with a $25,000 grant. My worry is if you don't edit it sooner rather than later, particularly as it relates to some of the amounts and the criteria, which I think are a bit vague, you're going to run through all the money, and it becomes an annual process of funding it, which I don't have any problem with. I think it's a good program, but I do think it needs to be refined. That being said, I'd support waiting until the end of the year to do the review based upon all the information. My only worry is you're going to run out of money before then. And I think that the first one that and I don't know, I think it's on the public record already that we have at least preliminarily approved $25,000 to the insurance company, Muskoka Insurance, that you're going to get lots more people coming in with the same kind of application between now and then that, in my opinion, don't fit the criteria or the strategic objective of this plan.
Okay.
Renovating office buildings. So those are my two concerns, which is I'm happy to wait, but you're going to probably run into a bunch of problems between now and then.
And I think that's what staff has highlighted as well, that whether it's problems or lessons learned. And I think that's why they had recommended what they have done is to say, listen.
But Susan, Councillor Chairman, was it the intention to fund it every year? I don't know the history.
That's a good question, and I will ask staff to comment, and then I am going to call the vote.
Yes, through you, Chair Mazan. Yes, the intention was to fund it annually for a period of 10 years was the recommendation in the CIP plan. And in developing the policy, and the grant amounts, we obviously did consider, how many applications we could get or we could support in that. And it's really hard at this point to make those decisions because we just don't know. And that's why staff are recommending if we can go through it through a year and see if we do get 6 applications that are the maximum amount for some of the streams. Potentially that's a good problem to have and something that we can promote as reinvestments into our community. Those are substantial projects and a large investment from the private sector themselves. into the longevity of our downtown properties and buildings themselves. I can say through some of my early pre-consultation meetings with the businesses that are interested, the ones that are asking for potentially, the full 25, which are only to the 2 streams, are far and few between. I don't think we're gonna, my early sense through those pre-consultation meetings is they're not at the top of the list. I hope that through some of the more recent discussions I've had, you'll see a more variety of those applications coming forward. That's my sense that I get for them, and I look forward to hopefully supporting those businesses and doing that. But I think waiting the year to evaluate that and gain that full understanding is the most appropriate path forward, and then we can do just that. We can make those decisions at that time. Plus, as Chair Mazan mentioned, I think there's other things along the way we might learn as well. I'd hate to miss something if we're going to be making amendments and changes to the policy. So I think if we can give it that time to give a full evaluation, that would be good. Hopefully that helps. Thanks, Chair Mazan.
Okay, thank you. Okay, Director Pink, you've just come on.
Thank you, Chair, for the indulgence. I just wanted to make one point of factual clarification because I sense there'll be an ensuing debate on the motion on potentially changing the boundary. I believe Councillor Zavitz mentioned 2 businesses in Bala that are not included in the boundary, Pangilly's Hardware and the Bala Garden Center. Both those properties are included in the boundary. So I just wanted to make that clear. You do have the appendix in your agenda packages, and it does show the CIP boundary, and I believe those 2 businesses are included. So I thought that just wanted to make that clarification.
Okay. Mayor Kelley, did you have a new comment? I'm sensitive to time, but I really did want to give. I knew that I think we all anticipated some healthy discussion about this particular topic. So,
I have one quick question and then one comment. I've forgotten the resolution, so when you do finally get to that point, if you could reread it, I'd appreciate it. My frustration really comes down to this. We're going through a budget exercise where anybody who's read the budget knows we don't have funds lying around waiting to hire more staff to get projects done. And to me, going back and questioning some of these things, and timing is one thing, but I know I got elected here, and I think we all did, for 3 or 4 really key issues, and I haven't heard any of them raised today. I haven't heard any real talk about protecting the environment. I haven't heard any real discussion about attainable housing. I haven't heard any real issue about, a lot of the stuff, the meat and potato stuff. We know that all of that work is going to come down to the capacity of our staff, our senior leadership team, and people throughout the organization to step up to a challenge that's huge. To develop programs and policies that we don't already have, to create licensing agreements or licensing programs, monitoring programs, by law enforcement programs that we don't have today. And I don't want to be stupid about, overlooking obvious cost recovery opportunities. But the simple fact of the matter is, we got to get after that stuff quick. And the same group of people that we're currently asking to go back and reevaluate whether there's gravel in a pit or whether we need to revisit the boundaries of something, I'm sure they're all noble and worthy undertakings. My sense of priority is that I want those people focused on the stuff that our constituents told us 75 days ago was the most important thing that we should get after. And I'm a little bit afraid that this is going to take far too much of staff time, and we'll have to punt on the other more meaningful things because we just don't have people to do all the work. So that's really at the core of my issue is what are we here for? Yes, it's to preserve and make sure that money is well spent and well invested, but at the end of the day, we have a very high calling, made worse by something like Bill 23, which lands in our lap somewhere in the middle of an election period. We can't not get after that stuff. We have to focus on that stuff. We need to keep some powder dry to make sure we can go after it effectively and quickly and get stuff done. So that's the reason why, if you sense frustration, that's what's at the root of it. Thanks.
Okay, thank you. Okay, I am going to read this resolution again. Moved by Councillor Burry, seconded by Councillor Zavitz. Be it resolved that no changes be made to the Community Improvement Plan boundary or the related policy at this time. All those in favor? All those opposed? Okay, so that's carried. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Moving on now to item 6B, report from the Economic Development Officer re the temporary patio program. Mr. Murray?
Yes, thank you. So to a little bit of background on this report for committee. Obviously, when COVID started, we implemented the temporary patio extension program to support the restaurant community, and that was particularly with them to meet the current regulations at that time regarding spacing requirements. That started in 2020. In 2021 and 2022, we extended that program. And obviously at the end of 2020, that program came to an end. So we are looking for direction moving forward from committee. We have connected with some of the agreement holders regarding a path forward. I think everyone would like to certainly move to some permanent solutions where they're able to, which I think is a great success from this program and showed the value in some of that additional space for them. In doing so, there's going to be some processes to work with on a few of those applicants to get them the proper approvals they require to have those additional spaces. And what we're recommending is, in the meantime, we do allow those particular applicants that have started the process to convert to permanent to operate on a temporary basis. That way it ensures that they can maintain that additional space for at least the start of this year as we work with them to get the approvals completed. The second part of this is the temporary liquor license extensions. We recently, at the beginning of the year, received notice from the province that this authority will now be delegated to municipalities. So what we're doing today is, additionally, we're looking for that authority to be delegated to the clerk or designate upon approval from all the internal departments on that specific application. With that, Chair, I'm happy to answer any questions, and I know Director Pinkin is available too from the planning side if there's anything.
Thank you very much. Okay, committee, any questions? Councillor Nishikawa.
Thank you, through to Corey. First of all, I agree with most of the things in the report, but one of the things that came out was signage. And has that been looked at? So for instance, where some of the patio extensions that had occurred, additional signage was then, I would say, placed closer to the road. Was that considered? And also because it was a concern by some people. And I think it would be kind of vague for the bylaw officer to deal with if a complaint came in.
Through you, Chair, I believe this was more in regards to the parking associated with the additional spaces. And I can say through the wayfinding signage that we received some grant funding on last year to install, we were able to get some of those signs in place towards the end of last year, but they are up now, and they do direct people to the public parking lots and spaces in the downtowns. And we have a few more to be erected this spring as well. So I think that's the signage the councillor is speaking towards.
Thank you.
If
Supplemental?
I may, that absolutely not. That's not what I'm talking about at all. I'm talking about the businesses themselves erecting a sign on the extended patio that is now, you know, that much closer to a roadway.
So, is this something that could be discussed in your negotiations with each property? I think, and I'm just making sure, maybe I can ask Mr. Moore, is it the, actually, this Councillor Nishikawa, is it the signs that are on the actual extensions or the patios? Is that, I just want to make sure I'm clear.
Again, the extended patios.
Yes.
It is not, I guess it is municipal property, but if we give this approval, are we then also approving whatever signage that they decide to attach to that fencing or whatever they've done to do that? So I'm just looking because it hasn't been clear, and certainly there was situations in over the last couple of years where certainly I received complaints from a particular property owner, and I'm just wanting to understand myself if we're allowing signage that, for instance, now more signage on 169 or 118.
Okay, so for my clarity, I just want to make sure I'm understanding. For today, we're just talking about the ability to discontinue this program, but allow for the time for discussion with each of the business owners. Is that something that would come back to us on a, just Councillor Nishikawa's point, right? Like if there's something that's being contemplated in discussion with staff and with perhaps one of these businesses, would that be coming back to us? I just want to make, from a process standpoint, Mr. Moore?
So in converting some of the current temporary spaces to permanent, yes, most likely through those processes, they'd be coming back to committee at some point for an approval, whether that's maybe as simple as a cash in lieu of parking application. But yes, they would, given the approvals that they'll most likely require, they'd be coming back to committee at some point for those. I do just want to make sure, so the temporary extensions program is for those only occurring on private property. So we don't necessarily, they're not encroaching onto township lands for these.
Okay.
So they are on the private property.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Zavitz?
Thank you, and through you, just I know this is question period, so I'll just frame my words. I certainly am in favor of alternative 2, but I would ask Mr. Moore if he could, I guess in 80 words or less, I know what I've heard from my constituents who are on the list. Could you maybe share with us what you've heard in terms of a preference from the folks that are directly affected by this? The businesses?
Sure. Through you, Chair Mazan, I think as an overall, we haven't received too many concerns regarding the patio extensions. And I think, you know, the biggest relief that the business owners receive through the program is the parking relief. And we haven't heard too many concerns regarding, you know, needing more parking spaces, etc., at those establishments. In saying that, we did receive one or a few comments in downtown Port Carling in particular about it. And I think, as we're aware, you know, Port Carling is a pretty tight place to begin with. So we did hear a little bit there, but as an overall, I say probably not a ton of concern overall township wide. But we did hear a few concerns regarding the lack of parking and now the additional space in downtown Port Carling. So
okay, so I'm not seeing any other hands up for questions right now. I will, if you can allow me to read the resolution, which in this, it says that this extension will happen till the end of this year to allow for time to work out more permanent solutions, correct? So I will read that resolution. Okay, moved by Councillor Edwards, seconded by Councillor Nishikawa. Be it resolved that the Township Temporary Patio Extension Program be discontinued and those previous temporary patio extension program agreement holders be permitted one final temporary patio extension until the year end 2023 to allow for the establishment of a permanent solution. And that the authority to approve liquor license extensions on behalf of the municipality respecting temporary patios on private property be delegated to the clerk or designate. Now I will ask, are there any further comments? Okay, not seeing any. Ask all those in favor. I think that carries. Thank you. And we are going to move on to the next topic. Mr. Moore, I'll turn the floor back to you, please. The electrical vehicle charging stations.
Yes, last report. A little bit of background, committee. We received a proposal this past summer from a company looking to install some electrical vehicle charging stations on our property in Bala at the Portage Landing parking lot. At the conclusion of that proposal presentation, staff were directed to take that proposal away and prepare some language and guidelines for the new official plan that would speak to the use of these electric vehicle charging stations on public property. So later that fall, we were able to return with those guidelines and received approval from committee and council on those. And you can see those guidelines in the background section of the report, but they help speak to the location, the type of technology we want to see, etc. I think it's tomorrow we have actually our report on our climate action plan, the first phase of that, the adaptation plan. But I think we're definitely going to be diving into the mitigation metrics and actions this year as the second phase to complete our overall climate action plan. But I think we can definitely see that electric vehicle charging stations are certainly going to be a mitigation metric or action that we're going to be wanting to explore. So with that today, we're just looking to bring that original proposal and recommendation back to committee for a decision, and staff can advise the applicant on that. With that, Chair Mazan, I know Director Becking, who's helped quite a bit with this as well, is available, as well as myself, if there's any questions.
Okay, thank you. Committee, any questions? Councillor Zavitz.
Thank you, and through you. Again, a question, I guess. So the last time this came forward, there was a lot of public outcry regarding the use of the township, our parking lot for this application. There was a lot of that. I haven't heard anything this time at all. Now, I'm wondering if and again, as a public servant, I would be aware because you would have sent it to me or made the public aware. Is the director aware of public comment on this? I haven't heard any.
Has there been any public comment or observation to this report? I don't know who. Director Becking?
None that I'm aware of, Madam Chair.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Nishikawa?
May I answer Councillor Zavitz's question?
I'm assuming that you have heard some feedback. So yes, I will permit you to do that. And then if you have another further question to staff, that's fine. Thank you for asking.
I certainly shared with the community, especially those that are going to be affected directly, and I think there was 18 people present that commented last evening about this. And quite frankly, that why would we do this?
Okay, so when we get to the debate, I appreciate that. Thank you. Any further questions to the report? I see Councillor Bosenworth.
Thank Thank you, Chair. I'm curious, will this company supply a similar service in Port Carling? Because I think this is a service that we need. We're definitely going to need. And then the other question is, do we consider putting this out to bid? I mean, you know, we're just, somebody came in and offered something and we're entertaining it. Is this something in the either director's opinion that there might be a number of providers who were keen to do this? So those are my two questions.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Moore?
I may, for the first part, I may turn that over to Director Becking. I know he was involved with some of the more early discussions on the location specifically. I'd maybe echo Councillor Bosemsworth's comments. If it's an opportunity for us to maybe include Port Carling as well from an economic development perspective, I would support that. As it speaks to the second part, again, Director Becking may want to touch on it, but there's certainly, I have experienced some communities that have gone out, you know, through an RFP process. If they have lands identified that they'd like to see EV charging stations located on. I know when we took the proposal away the first time, we did meet with a number of the companies that kind of provide these products themselves. And most of them are just in kind of the sale business. They just want to sell the product to the end user and then kind of operate it. I don't think there's a ton of money to be made available from a business case perspective in the collection of funds for the charging itself. And I think the proposal that we received today kind of states that there's not a large value to gain there. So I know a lot of the companies that produce the chargers, IV Flow, they prefer to just sell the product directly to the user themselves. But Director Becking, I don't know if you have any further comments on that.
Thank you, Director Becking. You're on mute.
I beg your pardon. The proposal that came forward was from SREL, and it was of a philanthropic nature, given their involvement in the generating station. Committee, some members of committee will recall that you did discuss this matter at some considerable length and determined that you didn't want to go down the road of being in the business of provision of charging stations. This was entirely a private sector initiated matter, and it was done from a perspective of being more philanthropic. To Mr. Moore's point, all of the evidence that we've seen to date would suggest that this is not a significant money-making proposition.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Zavitz and then Councillor Nishikawa.
Thank you, through you. So when we first discussed this, and of course there was some public concern, no question. And according to Councillor Nishikawa, it exists to this day. The concern was very specifically about the use of our parking lot, which is at times a very desirable and oft overworked parking lot. In a debrief session with Mr. Bellerique of Swift River, after the first time they came forward, I questioned him as to the opposite the hydro plant. There is a number of parking spots there that are still high profile right off Highway 169, and why not use that as in the alternative? Can I ask Director Becking, because this is exactly the same proposal we had before. There's no enhancements, revisions, changes to it whatsoever, as I read. I wonder if I could ask Director Becking, was that contemplated in subsequent discussions? Because that's where it should be, quite honestly.
Madam Chair, through you, I believe my memory on the matter is foggy, but I believe that that location was one of the ones considered and was rejected by our SREL as not being suitable. But beyond that, I think you would have to speak to SREL directly.
Okay, I do note that our CAO has come on, so I'm going to ask him to comment as well.
Thanks, Madam Chair. My recollection of this matter is that when it was initially discussed, committee sent staff a way to create some criteria by which we could evaluate proposals. Part of those criteria were the geographic area of the proposal. This is in the heart of Bala, and I believe that those criteria were to be enshrined in the official plan. And until the official plan was approved, committee or council directed that any proposal that came forward be evaluated against that criteria. Mr. Moore has done that and has a recommendation in this respect. I'm not sure if Mr. Pink has any additional comments that he wishes to add. Thank you.
Thank you, Director Pink.
No, nothing further to add. Obviously, the CEO is correct. We were sent away for that criteria. It was included in the adopted official plan that's before the district for approval. And in the interim, we've evaluated proposals against that policy and hence staff's recommendation on the current request.
Thank you. Councillor Nishikawa.
Thank you. I guess my question would be, when staff makes recommendations, or has the value of the land been evaluated? So for instance, this is prime real estate in downtown Bala. And you know, it's public property, and doesn't the public get to have an understanding of, if we're giving up space of our public space, shouldn't the public know what the value of that property is, as opposed to we're doing some goodwill and there might be $1,000 in it for you, kind of thing. So I'm just wondering if staff has done that, and in fact, could I suggest that we do that in the future next time we're recommending use of our public lands?
Thank you, Mr. Moore.
I may actually pass it to Director Becking, who deals kind of with the township properties a little bit more in that regard, if I may.
Okay, thank you. Director Becking. Oh, you're on mute.
Madam Chair, because there was no sale of lands intended in the proposal, the answer to the question is no, there was no evaluation of the value of the land.
Okay. Are there any other questions? So I would like to, oh, Councillor Edwards.
Yes, I believe the last time there was questions asked about the location of those parking spots. I thought we were moving them to the back of the lot. That was one. Secondly, $1,000 a year doesn't sound like much, because when I look at their estimate of 5 charges a day and everything else like that, it's going to go up. And where are we going to put these charging stations in the future if all electric, all vehicles have to be electric in that? And that the thing, we're going to have to maybe provide some spots, are we not? So just a thought. I'm not opposed to it, but I don't like them taking the prime spot right at the front of the lot at this time. Thank you.
Question. Thank you. Councillor Boseworth.
Yes, if I may have a question for Councillor Nishikawa, who had met with some people recently. And I'm interested in their opinion on, it sounds to me like they're mostly in opposition. And if you could just give me a brief flavor of what that is, just to help understand the whole context of this.
If I may.
Yes, thank you.
So it's interesting, 3 of the people have their own charging stations at home. And then the whole concept about charging was discussed a lot because in fact, many vehicles don't fit into the standard go in and plug in. And also the length of time. So again, different vehicles take different lengths of time. So you might have somebody there for 5 hours, whereas and just for this particular parking lot, these are people in and out of the bakery, which has a lineup, a continual lineup from 7 o'clock in the morning on. So, and the other businesses there too. But a lot of it was some sour taste of treatments in the past. And I don't want to say that didn't come out and it was part of the conversations, but really, are we really going to do this for $1,000? Which is essentially was the information that I read, that there's not going to be a big deal of this, but mostly why wouldn't they use the Shield parking lot was a big question as well.
Thank you.
Why wouldn't they, or why would they? Sorry, just for my clarification, I didn't hear that correctly.
Why would they not? I mean, it's a much, much larger parking area, and there's a couple of corners that are probably much more ideal than using our prime real estate.
Thank you. And if I may, that was going to be my question to staff. Is there the opportunity through this to perhaps accept in principle, but reevaluate the actual location of these? Because I hear the comments. So I guess the question is, throughout this process, is there still an opportunity to discuss the actual location? Mr. Moore, Mr. Becking, Director Becking.
Thank you, Madam Chair. The reason for the location being selected is the availability of electricity. At the Shield parking lot, as an example, there is no direct connection to a source of power in close proximity. And the proponent was concerned about the capital cost, including connection to the existing electric grid.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Edwards, and then Councillor Zapps.
I was just waiting for an answer for my question, which was, can they not relocate it to a different spot rather than taking the front of that parking lot? That was one. And I think the cost is too low. I don't know what the staff think about that, but $1,000 is not enough. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Director Becking, is the possibility exists for it to be at a different point in the parking lot?
Yes, Madam Chair. The choice of location initially proposed was because it's directly adjacent to the source of power. Through the burying of underground cables, it could be possible to move it to the back of the parking lot if that was the direction of council. The proponent would then have to make a decision as to whether or not to pursue the proposal.
Okay, thank you. And then the other comment or question, I believe, is that dollar amount like a set amount, or is there opportunity for more? And I think that must be Mr. Moore.
Yeah, I think the proposal stated 10% of the net revenue is what they're looking at. And I think it works. I mean, it's going to be, I think, pretty nominal, but I don't think we're looking at seeing anything more than $1,000. I think, and Director Becking can correct me if I'm wrong, but just in doing some of the research I've done in this field and how municipalities are approaching it, typically what I've seen is the space is provided free of charge. And the company itself is just in charge of the cost of installation and implementation. So I think we had discussed this a little bit at previous from the outset, without going through a legal review of the agreement and everything. It seemed in line with what other municipalities are approaching and kind of a public-private partnership. Director Becking, do you see anything different in your experience by any chance?
Madam Chair, Mr. Moore is correct in his overview of how the proposal works in other jurisdictions, according to my knowledge anyway.
Thank you. Okay, Councillor Zavitz and then Councillor Burry.
Well, thank you. And again, I've stated this earlier, and it doesn't seem to be acknowledged, but the hydro generated by that plant comes across the road and it lands on the pole that is right at the bottom is where I'm suggesting the 2 parking spots. It's what I already spoke to Swift River about. So the reason they want our parking lot for those 2 high profile locations is just that, to put a nice sign up and scratch their own back. I mean, that's great. And I think it's a wonderful service offering to the traveling public, the users and taxpayers of our township. My concern is I'm not being heard, and I will not support these 2 spots in our parking lot directly adjacent Don's Bakery. But there are, I think there's like 6 parking spots right across the road from the hydro plant, right before the bridge, the new $2 million bridge we're building. Perfect location. Put in 3, put in 4, I don't care. But that's the location. It's ground zero for the power. That's where it should be. And that's why I got voted in Ward A to know Ward A. And I'm telling you, that's where it should be, not in this parking lot. Thank you.
Okay, so I think the question again is, and I just want clarity on this, is that it comes back once again to location. That location would have that Councillor Zavitz is talking about would have access to power, correct, Director Becking?
There is power there, yes, ma'am.
Okay, so the second thing is in your conversations with the applicant or the proposal, that idea has been put forward to them, and for whatever reason, they have rejected that idea. Is that correct?
That is my recollection, Madam Chair.
Okay. Okay, thank you. Councillor Burry?
So I have a comment, not a question. Am I allowed to make it?
Why don't you allow me to read the resolution and then we can get to the comments. Okay, thank you. Okay, moved by Councillor McIntyre, seconded by Councillor Burry. Be it resolved that the proposal from Horizon Net Zero Energy Inc. for the construction of electric vehicles charging stations at the Portage Landing parking lot be agreed to in principle, and that staff are directed to undertake a legal review of the proposed agreement between the Township and Horizon Net Zero Energy Inc., and if necessary, further negotiates its provisions. And further, that a final draft of the agreement be presented to Council for consideration of endorsement. So now, if I could, I'd ask for comment, and I will allow Councillor Burry to make a comment.
Thank you. So my first comment is that the transition to EVs is coming, whether people like it or not. These stations will likely be used by traveling public, which the last time I looked was very important to our economy. Those of us that have EVs have EV charging stations on our own property, but having an EV charging station close to a place that you're going to visit as a traveling public will likely be highly beneficial. We're very close to a source of power that will allow these to be superchargers, which means we're talking about 18 minutes to do a 85 to 90% load on a 600 kilometer battery. So they're not going to be there for 5 years. Anyone that has an EV has conversion kits to allow them to charge just about anywhere. And the neat thing about EV charging stations is it gets put on every GPS in every EV that's being sold in North America, which is going to be to the tune of several 100,000 units a year very shortly. I think we've got to stop being NIMBYs, frankly, and look at where we can go forward from here. I agree that these are too prime a location, and that we can probably do better. But the fact that we're right beside a power generating station and that there'll be good power, these will be very quick charges in and out, probably longer than the 20 minutes it takes one to go in and out of Don's Bakery on those days where they have the line up down the street. But I agree, maybe we want to take a look at a different location that can still give the proponents the exposure that they want, but we're going to need to facilitate EV charging stations in our township one way or another. It's coming, and we don't have a choice.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Roberts.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and through you, I propose that we defer this. I've heard really good support on either side of. I'm not putting there someplace else, and I suggest it be deferred. That staff can go back to the applicant and say and propose a different location that we have come up with that would be far more acceptable. I think eventually we'll see these spots in our public area. Yes, it will be very fast charging, but you know, human habit, they'll park the car and leave it there and go someplace outside of Bala, and then come back hours later for a charged car. So I think the best option is defer and see if we can influence the applicant to move it to the location that Councillor Zavitz is proposing. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Bosenworth.
Frankly, I'm quite excited about this proposal. I there is a lot of charging stations in Muskoka, as far as I know. I concur completely with Councillor Burry. But that said, Councillor Nishikawa's comments and Councillor Zavitz about this being prime parking spots and Councillor Roberts' point that people might be long past the 20 minutes. I think I was just looking at Google Maps across the street. Maybe we want to alter the financial conditions to make that possible, because as Councillor Zavitz puts out, you probably put 5 or 6 there. But I agree, we need to start thinking about having these in our parking lots. So defer.
Thank you very much, Councillor Bosenworth. Councillor Nishikawa.
Thank you. I just wanted to remind people, or if you were not aware of, this area is incredibly important for the Cranberry Festival. So if we're going to now say that the Cranberry Festival shouldn't be in the, so also understanding that that parking lot is split in two. So half of it is owned by Dawn's and the rest is owned from the Township Muskoka Lakes. So again, the size of that parking space may not be as large as others think it is of the municipal parking area, but it is incredibly important to the Cranberry Festival, which is a huge economic driver.
Okay, thank you. I'm just was consulting our acting clerk just to see how we move forward from here after having read the resolution. I think the primary thing we are sensing is perhaps an openness to the EV station, but that the location is what's creating a bit of discussion. So I do have the possibility of amending the resolution, and I'm just reading it here, to remove the portion of it that says in the Portage Landing parking lot, to say, and to replace it with what? And would it, and that's the question what I'm asking, is should we say that remove it?
A mutually agreeable location.
Within Bala?
Yeah. And the proviso, it can be closed for the weekend of the Cranberry Festival, if necessary.
So I'm just getting a sense, our acting clerk here is trying to capture the essence of what we're trying to accomplish here without perhaps deferring it. We could accept the concept and principle but saying we actually want further conversation as it relates to the location. And I'm seeing Mr. Moore, you're nodding your head. Do you think that's the appropriate approach here? You're not in the room with me, so I just want to make sure that I'm giving you the appropriate direction.
Yes, I just wanted to confirm, yeah, that direction is clear to staff and would agree and echo Councillor Burry's suggestions.
I didn't mention cranberry.
Okay, we have not included the discussion around Cranberry Festival specifically, but what we have done, and I see your hand up, Councillor Nishikawa, I'll just read what I have amended here, and then I'm going to turn it over to, or ask Councillor Nishikawa again to respond. Replace the wording with a mutually agreed upon location within Bala. Okay, so Councillor Nishikawa.
Thank you. I'm not sure why we're trying to amend this. It's not the suitable location. I don't believe we should be sending staff off when in fact they've got a lot to do. And this is not high on the priorities, in my opinion, but to move something forward in the manner that we're suggesting at this point, without not a whole lot of homework, I'll just say that, I think is irresponsible of this committee, and that it should, in fact, it should go to a committee of some form, and maybe the mayor is going to have a committee in the future, but it's not today. And I'm very concerned that, of course, this is going to come back to council next month. And how does the community, so now, like, should I just as a councillor be putting lots of posters out there saying, have your voice heard? Because let's also remember the time of year. And how do we engage with the community when a good chunk of them are not even here, but they do have a voice? And I'm just thinking that we're trying to move this forward in the wrong direction too fast. And that, in fact, it should be voted on as it was read, not amended. And then if there is a will for this council to come forward with other opportunities, locations, and all of those things, that comes through a committee. Because this on the fly thing is not the correct way to do things, in my opinion.
So one other possible amendment we could make to the resolution is to say be presented to, instead of council, but to committee. So that it would then come back to this committee with the fine tuning, and all that does is add further timing to the actual process, but staff could go away, have a discussion about the location, and it would come back to committee versus to council. So that is another amendment. I do see Councillor Edwards, you have your hand up.
After listening to Councillor Nishikawa, and that I would agree, we should be voting on it the way it is. Then Swift River will know they're not getting no 2 parking spots. So they'll, if they want to put something in, then they will and not come back with another location. As Councillor Zabit said, he had pointed out to them where they could put them. They could put 3 or 4 in there. So I would say maybe we should just be voting on this the way it is, and if it's turned down, then they'll know we mean business. Thank you.
Okay, so we have 2 different approaches, and here I'm finding myself in an interesting spot. So we can vote on the resolution as it's been read. Sorry, somebody just. We can vote on the resolution as it's been read, or we can amend it, sending back specific direction to staff to focus on discussions on location within the Bala area. And that we could also further amend it to say, please bring that back to committee versus to council. So now I'm going to do a straw poll to get a sense from people so that we can continue to move this particular one along. Is there a feeling, a straw poll, would you like to vote on the resolution as it is? Those in favor of voting on the resolution as I have read it, please put up your hand. Okay, so if I could also then see those who would be, it's a bit close here, so I'm going to ask the other question. Those who would be in favor of reading an amended resolution with the 2 caveats on location and it coming back to committee. Okay, I'm going to read the resolution as it is then, committee, and we will move forward in that way. Moved by Councillor McIntyre, seconded by Councillor Burry. Be it resolved that the proposal from Horizon Net Zero Energy Inc. for the construction of electrical vehicles charging stations in the Portage Landing parking lot be agreed to in principle, and that staff are directed to undertake a legal review of the proposed agreement between the township and Horizon Net Zero Energy Inc., and if necessary, further negotiate its provision, and further that a final draft of the agreement be presented to council for consideration of endorsement. All those in favor? Okay, all those not in favor? Thank you. Okay, that motion is defeated. Thank you. No problem. Thank you very much. I am going to continue on so that we can then have an appropriate lunch before our council meeting. There's only a few other items on the agenda, and that will allow us all to have an appropriate lunch period as well. So we have our unfinished business, none. And I'm going to move now into the new business section. There's 3 distinct areas in this. There's the District of Muskoka updates. There's community event, and then a verbal report from our acting clerk on a request from last month, sorry. And there is one other item that has come up that kind of falls, and I would suggest maybe that Mr. Roberts, I will allow you to, Councillor Roberts, sorry, to bring forward your idea right after the District of Muskoka updates, okay? With that said, district councillors, I will start with you, Mayor Kelley, then Councillor Burry, Councillor Nishikawa, and then Councillor Edwards.
Thank you, and through you, not a whole lot, but there is a strategic planning exercise at district that's just been initiated. I believe there will be in fact, I know there's a consultant that has been engaged, and it consists of the 6 mayors and the chair. Details to follow. I'm not sure even what the focus will be. The other thing is we did have Chair Lehman and the CAO, Julie Stevens, join Derek and I, our CAO and I, in our office on Friday, I believe it was. And then I went off and had lunch with Chair Lehman afterwards. He's doing a good job of assimilating and trying to become plugged right in. He has a huge capacity to learn, obviously, because he knows a heck of a lot already, considering this is a new relationship. Must spend a lot of time getting ready for things and boning up on things. So it's been great so far. From the district perspective, there are a lot of like minds. I think the other 2 township mayors have a similar view to the Township of Muskoka Lakes mayor on the environment and so on. So it's good at building a relationship with them as well. That's what I'm going to say for district.
Okay, thank you. I think I said Councillor Burry next, correct? Yes.
Yeah, I likewise not a whole lot. The draft tax supported budget is going to be discussed starting next week. Initial net levy increase over 2022 is proposed to be 5.17. Which was below the approved guideline that got there before I did, which was 6.5. So more to come. It's a 470 odd page deck.
Okay.
Wish me luck.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Councillor Burry. Councillor Nishikawa.
Thank you. And Guy, boo-hoo to you. I'm just saying.
And you too. I'm wishing all of us.
But mostly Alan's been talking about it for lots of years, so I wanted
Okay, I'm still new, Ruth. I'm new.
Yes, I mean, certainly we're dealing with our budgets, especially next week. But I want to just take a moment to say that I'm hoping that with Mayor Kelley and Councillor Burry that we can come up with a bit of a report from our Roma experiences, because it was an excellent time, and in fact, I personally was able to take in a couple of presentations that I made some great notes, and it was on short-term rentals, and then of course the long-term care act and different things that affect my health services role. But I did want to mention that I did take part in another discussion that I will be bringing forward with district about the use of golf carts in a municipality. And it was very, very interesting. I think there was, I think I read something in the way of 40 municipalities that were involved in this particular presentation, and how it improved. And most of them were lakefront properties. But again, it's an opportunity to look into what we can do differently and better in the township of Muskoka Lakes that has been proven, for instance, in Prince Edward County and some other locations. Really exciting, I would say, and I look forward to sharing that presentation with others. And in fact, I took note of who to invite to our council to a future presentation, because it can open up so many doors for us. And also, it's environmentally friendly, just saying.
Thank you. I actually would like to suggest that if we are away at conferences and we do have these types of insights, it would be interesting, and I'll just make a mental note of it at this point. I'm looking at the clerk to say, how do we build that type of discussion into our agendas? So thank you for bringing that forward. Councillor Edwards.
Yes, thank you very much. Councillor Nishikawa was speak on the golf carts. I think that's a very good idea, and I'm going to be very, very brief. On the early years and childcare funding, there's been an increase of $2 million, and they said they were going to sign an agreement with that. And then with affordable housing, there was a proposal put forward of 24 Veterans Way in Huntsville, and they will be getting $600,000. That's $100,000 per unit, and it's a 25-year affordable period, so it's a loan. And that is my report. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Moving on, I am going to ask Councillor Roberts to put in a request, and it doesn't fall naturally under one of our categories. So I'm going to ask you to make a comment about a recent experience you had, or opportunity, I should say.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Yes, I thank you for the opportunity. Last Tuesday, I attended, along with a few of my other township peers, a nonpartisan meeting with Mike Schreiner, leader of the Green and MPP for Guelph, to discuss the impacts and issues pertaining to Bill 23. There were two separate meetings, one in the morning and one in the afternoon. In total, Mr. Schreiner met with 5 mayors, including from Township Muskoka Lakes, Lake of Bays, Georgian Bay, and Bracebridge, and Armour Township. 15 councillors from TML, Gravenhurst, Lake of Bays, Berks Falls, Perry Township, Sunridge, and Armour and Bracebridge attended. It was well attended in the session that we attended in the morning. Unfortunately, Huntsville representatives were not able to attend due to a budget meeting that was scheduled, but I understand that Mr. Schreiner met separately with some of the Huntsville councillors. Key issues raised by the mayors and the councillors in attendance in both sessions: removal of site plan control will allow development of sensitive water bodies in floodplains and wetland areas and will impact water quality and environment. Changes to the wetland evaluation system will result in less protection for critically important wetlands. Removal of development fees will burden municipalities with increased infrastructure costs and resulting in local taxation increases. Sprawl development in the greenbelt into protected agriculture farmlands will impact food supply and security. Bill 23 appears to do little for affordable housing, emphasized on affordable rather than attainable. Sorry, I'm going fast, it's just in the essence of time. I'm speaking very fast. Actions proposed out of the session. Wholeheartedly agreed to form a working group under the leadership of Rod Ward, Mayor of Armour Township, to bring a collective voice to Queen's Park. The purpose of the communication would be our shared concerns pertaining to Bill 23 from a local rural perspective and propose alternative solutions to address attainable affordable housing while protecting shorelines, lakes, forests, and wetlands. Mike Shearer agreed to support, advise the working committee as needed and bring a joint submission to the Legislation Assembly. It was suggested that the AMO should be used by but others felt working together, forming an amalgamation with Melga, Muskoka, and Parry Sound across many local municipalities would be a better reflection of the unique character of our regions and economic defense of the natural environment. I plan to be a working member on this this working group, and as anyone on committee can as well be a working group. But I'll take your thoughts. If you don't want to be on the working group, I can take your thoughts and present them to the committee. Now, there will be, most likely, I would expect, there'll be a resolution coming from this group, a suggested resolution for each council to approve. That's only my assumption. And that is my submission or my update. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. So I just wanted to summarize that if members of our committee have any thoughts, we could send those to you. We're not being asked to make a decision or do anything today. I see Mayor Kelley, you have your hand up. But the possibility of some kind of a resolution would be coming back to this committee to discuss at some point in time, and or planning committee probably. Yeah, okay, thank you. Mayor Kelley? Just one or two small comments. I would not have characterized that as nonpartisan, but everything I noticed was green, like the handouts and everything was on green paper. But it was an excellent meeting, and it brought together people interested in the same things we are, on the same watershed as we are, but outside of the jurisdiction of our district. So it's people we don't normally get to talk to. So I thought that was a great exercise. Okay, thank you. And I do want to ask our, sorry, my fault. That's okay. Our clerk would like to make a comment. Thank you.
Yes, through you, Chair Mazan, and good morning. I just wanted to raise the point that without being officially appointed by the township, that any representation on this committee would be as an individual and not as a representative of the township of Muskoka Lakes. And should you request or require township endorsement of something, it would need to come back to committee and further then be endorsed by council. So be careful. At this point, you are not representing the township because we have not appointed any of you to this group, and I would request that you articulate that in all of your dealings with the group. If you wish to change that, be happy to entertain a resolution next month at council to provide some background on this committee and what it is you intend to do. So please reach out if you would like to review that particular thing.
Okay, thank you. Sorry, thank you. I'm seeing a nod of heads on that. Thanks for your efforts there, Councillor Roberts. Moving on, community events. Any upcoming community events? Not seeing any. I would like then to pass on the floor over to, again, our acting clerk. Sorry, I have to.
Thank you again, Chair Mazan, through you to committee. At the last General Finance Committee meeting, the General Information Correspondence Procedure adopted by committee on May the 11th and ratified by Council in June of 2022 was raised. Today, I have a couple of points to make regarding what was passed. The report is attached, as is the resolution. Prior to us coming forward with this presentation or with this report, there were a few things that we were made aware of by different members of council. One is that the township receives approximately 12 to 14 pieces of correspondence each month from other municipalities and from other groups. The second note is that the procedure bylaw, section 3.2, requires that each motion be written and signed by a mover and a seconder. At the time, further to the report, we were appending these resolutions to an agenda, and the concern with that was that they were not available to committee members or to the public until the agenda is published, which is on the Friday prior to the meeting. So further adding this correspondence adds to what many consider to be lengthy and somewhat burdensome agendas to read. So as such, it was decided to make these available through the government portal so that councillors could review these pieces of information at their leisure. They would have time to liaise with their fellow councillors and determine if they wish to move and second such a resolution, and then could contact the clerk, and we could bring the matter forward in time for publication on the proper agenda. The previous process required that you would read the thing on Friday, would have to come up with all of this over the weekend in time for it to be added to a supplementary agenda, which is published at 2 o'clock the day before the meeting. So there was a tight timeline around making all of this happen efficiently and properly. So I open it up to you. We're more than happy to change the process. It matters not to staff. It's an equal amount of work in terms of providing the information to you, but the concern was raised, and so I'm happily receive your feedback on this.
Okay, thank you. Committee, any questions? Okay, well, I do appreciate that. I guess with no questions, we'll continue on the process we currently are, but I do appreciate the background on that. I know that's something that we have been working through. Where am I on this agenda? Where did we go? No general information. Well, there is. Are there any questions or comments on the general information or correspondence? Okay, seeing none. There's no closed session. Pleased to say that we can actually adjourn. It is currently 5-1. Mayor Kelley, you're on next. I would assume that we'd want to give an hour for lunch. Do you want to suggest starting at 2? That gives us an hour and 5 minutes. Okay. Thank you, everybody, for your time today. I am going to move by Councillor Kent, seconded by Councillor Zavitz. Be it resolved that this meeting adjourn at 1:54 p.m. My is that says 12:54. Okay, 12:54 p.m. and that the next regular meeting of the General and Finance Committee will be held on Wednesday, March the 15th of 2023 at 9 a.m. or at the call of the chair electronically from the Council Chambers, Municipal Office in Port Carling, Ontario. All those in favor? Thank you. That's carried. Thanks, committee. We will see everybody at 1 hour.